The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair chair, office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Not only are we pleased to have Superbeats as an underwriter for our program, but it's a great product that I drink every day. Check it out at Thom's Beats, THOMSBEETS.com, or give them a call at 800-568-9889. Superbeats. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Make Trouble, Standing Up, Speaking Out, and Finding the Courage to Lead by Cecile Richards, the outgoing head of Planned Parenthood and daughter of Ann Richards, the former governor of Texas. This is from the introduction. Little lady, you're just trying to make trouble. That was my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Powers, at University Park Elementary School in Dallas. She had spent the last 15 minutes conducting an interrogation. Why was I refusing to recite the Lord's Prayer with the rest of the class? Mrs. Powers was a lifer at UPS with permed helmet hair that was the fashion back then. She was a good old gal who probably smoked with the other teachers in the teacher's lounge. Looking back, I'm not even sure I knew it was unconstitutional to have us start each day with the Lord's Prayer, but by God we did right after the Pledge of Allegiance. That morning, though, I just wasn't having it. When Mrs. Powers asked why I wasn't participating, I said calmly, "We don't read the Bible in my house." Mrs. Powers' eyes flew open. I could see from her stricken look that she had taken my candor for cheekiness. I suppose in a way it was. We weren't a religious family, not in a traditional sense, but we did go to the Unitarian Church, which was sort of a home away from home for progressive families like ours in Dallas, our own little bunker in the middle of the crazy culture war of the 60s and the heart of the local anti-Vietnam War movement. Folks in our congregation were involved in everything from United Farm Workers organizing to Notes from the Underground, Dallas's radical newspaper, which my dad happened to be defending in court. Religion was cool with me, it just didn't include the Lord's Prayer. It was pretty obvious to Mrs. Power's reaction what she thought about that. There was no hope for me, clearly. I was headed for a life of crime. Up until then, I was a classic all-A's first child. I lived to make my parents proud of me, given their relative youth and inexperience in child rearing meant adhering to certain rules. I was the kid who never got in trouble, a trait that annoyed my younger brother Dan to no end. I never forgot the shame and humiliation of being called out in front of my class at age 11. But in that moment, I realized something about myself. My parents weren't the only ones who didn't fit into the right-wing Dallas establishment. I, too, was an outlier. It was the first time I remember having to decide, do I accept things the way they are or question authority? I chose the latter, and from that point forward, I was branded a troublemaker. Once the initial shock wore off, it became a badge of honor. I've been making trouble ever since, which to me means taking on the powers that be, being a thorn in someone else's side, standing up to injustice, or just plain raising hell. Sometimes being a troublemaker can be pretty damn awesome. After all, it was one of the great troublemakers of all time, Emma Goldman, who once said, "If I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution." Other times it's scary and carries big risks, the risk of losing your job, your friends, your reputation, or all of the above. Over the years, I've had the good fortune to meet troublemakers from all walks of life. Nursing home workers in East Texas, janitors in Los Angeles, members of Congress, organizers and activists of every age on the front lines of the struggle for justice. I watched in awe as my mother, Ann Richards, went from frustrated housewife to governor of Texas, defying convention and the political establishment. That was one of the things that drew me to Planned Parenthood. Its history is the history of brave, troublemaking women, and a few good men, who risked their reputations and even their lives to change things. We fellow travelers have a way of finding each other, whether we set out to or not. This book is the story of the people who have taught me about courage and defiance and making change. It's also my story, which has been somewhat daunting to write. A lot of rabble-rousers, particularly rabble-rousing women, like a lot of rabble-rousers. I'm a lot more comfortable talking about my work than myself. But now, almost every day, people come up to me, usually with a look of distress, to ask, "How are you doing?" They seem to be thinking that working for progressive causes is unpleasant or burdensome. Truth is, anything worth doing has its challenges. And yes, fighting for what you believe in can be discouraging, defeating, and sometimes downright depressing. But it can also be powerful, inspiring, fun, and funny. And it can introduce you to people who will change your life. That's the message I want to spread far and wide. That's why I wrote this book. I started my career organizing women who were working for the minimum wage. There were women in New Orleans who cleaned hotel rooms or did the laundry work because only white women got to work the front desk. Women in small-town Texas who used to joke that they'd stick around their job at the local nursing home until a Walmart opened nearby, and then they could move on to a better or at least easier job. Women who were earning a living and didn't have much choice about the kind of work they did. As for me, I know full well what a privilege it is to work for social justice. I've had the chance to work on historic political campaigns, go toe-to-toe with the far right in Texas, and come back years later to occupy the Capitol in Austin as part of the fight for abortion rights. I've served the first woman to lead her party in the U.S. House of Representatives and the 2.4 million people who count on Planned Parenthood for health care every year. I've seen generational progress through the eyes of my 3 incredible kids. Sure, there have been some brutal moments along the way. Appearing before a certain belligerent congressional committee comes to mind, not to mention a couple of awful election nights. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Maybe activism is your avocation, not your vocation. You might be even wondering if it's worth it, especially now when nothing seems certain. For the first time in my life, I'm wondering whether my own daughters will have fewer rights than I have. That alone is enough motivation for me to keep making trouble. Maybe.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Remember Martha Mitchell? If you're of a certain age that is old enough to remember Watergate, then you probably certainly remember Martha Mitchell. If you're a young'un let me tell you about Martha Mitchell. Martha Mitchell was a sweet lady. She was born in 1918, died in 1976. We'll get to that in just a minute. She married John Mitchell in 1957, and they had a daughter who was born in 61. But the really pivotal time was 1972, right after the break-in. The Watergate break-in was reported in the Washington Post. Her husband, John Mitchell, who was Attorney General of the United States, hired a former FBI agent by the name of Steve King to basically lock down Martha. And because Martha was freaked out, her daughter's bodyguard and driver, James McCord, was one of the guys who got arrested at the Watergate. And so Martha was like, oh my God, you know, this is my family, plus her husband, you know, was the chief law enforcement officer of the country. And so she gets on the phone with Helen Thomas, who was with the Washington Post at that time, or maybe the Associated Press. I think it was AP. Helen Thomas was always with the AP. And this FBI agent, Steve King, pulls the telephone wire literally out of the wall. She fights back. They kidnap her. They take her to California. They stick her in a hotel room. A psychiatrist comes in, shoots her up with sedative drugs. After a physical struggle with 5 men on behalf of her husband and this former FBI agent, Steve King, beat her up so badly she needed stitches. Richard Nixon himself told David Frost after he resigned, and I quote, "If it hadn't been for Martha Mitchell, there'd have been no Watergate." And 2 years after all this happened, in 1974, 2 years later in 1976, Martha Mitchell suddenly slips into a coma and dies. Oh, she's got multiple myeloma. And it's a cancer. And there's, you know, to this day, people going, really? Okay, so I tell you that story because there's a bunch of people who are really wondering what the heck is going on with Melania Trump. She has vanished. It's been like 21, 22 days since anybody has seen her in public or she has spoken in public. She sent out a tweet yesterday in response to this. But did she send this tweet? I mean, rest assured is a phrase that even people like, you know, people like me, I mean, you know, I grew up American, I grew up Midwest, I grew up with normal American English. Both my parents were college educated, but, you know, rest assured is the kind of thing that comes out of a PR hack, right? I mean, you don't say to your, oh, rest assured, everything's going to be fine. Well, anyhow, here's her tweet. I see the media is working overtime speculating where I am and what I'm doing. Rest assured, I'm here at the White House with my family, feeling great and working hard on behalf of children and the American people. Melania Trump didn't write that. At least it sure doesn't sound like anything that Melania Trump wrote or has ever written in the past. Now, I did quickly check out Michelle Obama's Twitter feed to see if she had said, hey, you know, nobody's heard from me in a little while. Rest assured, I'm fine. Because whatever Michelle Obama says, Melania tends to say somewhat later. But no, it didn't happen. And there's a whole bunch of people on Twitter going, What? But I think bigger news coming out of the Trump White House right now. So, you know, where do you think Melania is? Is she hiding? Is she, I mean, you know, a lot of possibilities here. Is, you know, what could it be? Did she escape through the sinkhole in the White House lawn? You know, there was a sinkhole a year ago in Mar-a-Lago, and then there's a sinkhole in the White House lawn last week. And, you know, is she trying to tunnel out? Is she being held captive? I mean, I'd like to see a picture of her holding a newspaper with today's date on it. Then I might, you know, relax. But meanwhile, Donald Trump just pardoned Dinesh D'Souza. This is part of his campaign, in my opinion. This is part of his campaign to reassure people like Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen that if you just hold strong, if you just keep faith, if you just do what I tell you, implicitly, and, you know, gum up the investigation and don't testify, then I will pardon you. If you do like Scooter Libby did, right? Commit a crime, but then stay loyal to in Scooter Libby's case, he wouldn't rat out Dick Cheney for outing a CIA officer. So Scooter Libby took the rap, Donald Trump pardoned him. So here we got Dinesh D'Souza. This is a guy who pled guilty to a federal felony of illegal campaign contributions, using a straw donor to make illegal campaign contributions. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation, 8 months in a halfway house, and a $30,000 fine. This is the guy, just so you know who we're talking about here. Dinesh D'Souza is an immigrant from India who became a naturalized U.S. citizen. Hard right wing. He wrote a book, for example, called The Enemy at Home, The Cultural Left and Its Responsibility for 9/11. Yep, you got it. Liberals are responsible for 9/11. In fact, he wrote, and I quote, "The cultural left in this country is responsible for causing 9/11. The cultural left and its allies in Congress, the media, Hollywood, the nonprofit sector, and the universities are the primary cause of the volcano of anger toward America that is erupting from the Islamic world." No, it's got nothing to do with the fact that George W. Bush lied us into a war in Iraq and stupidly went into a war in Afghanistan and blew up and killed, literally millions of Iraqis and Afghans. I think Afghan is the right word. It certainly displaced multiple millions. Maybe he only killed a couple 100,000. But you think that might have something to do with why they're pissed off at us? I suspect so. But Dinesh D'Souza, no. It's because we allow gay marriage in the United States. And no, I'm not exaggerating that. He has riffed extensively about some of these issues. With regard to Trayvon Martin, right after Trayvon Martin was shot, Dinesh D'Souza tweeted, "I'm thankful this week when I remember that America is big enough and great enough to survive grown-up Trayvon in the White House." See, when Trayvon Martin was shot, Barack Obama was president. Incredible. In 2010, in Forbes magazine, Dinesh D'Souza wrote about Barack Obama and his father, who was a Kenyan socialist economist. Yes, all that's true. His father was from Kenya. So, and he wrote Dreams of My Father, his book. So here's what Dinesh D'Souza writes. "Incredibly, the U.S. is being ruled according to the dreams of a Luo tribesman of the 1950s. Oh, his father was a tribesman. Incredible. "This philandering, inebriated African socialist is now setting the nation's agenda through the reincarnation of his dreams in his son. The invisible father provides the inspiration, and the son dutifully gets the job done. Today, America is governed by a ghost." In his film about how Obama secretly hates America and only ran for president so he could destroy the country, he's written 3 anti-Obama books, openly flouted the law. This is the guy that Trump is now saying, yeah. Oh, and highly critical of feminism. He said, "The feminist error was to embrace the value of the workplace as greater than the value of the home." Yes, a woman's place is in the home, don't you know? About Abu Ghraib and the prisoner abuse scandal? Oh, that's the result of the sexual immodesty of liberal America. And the conditions at the prison in Abu Ghraib, well, those are comparable to accommodations at mid-level Middle Eastern hotels. His tweets have mocked the survivors of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting. He says this was the worst news there since their parents told them to get summer jobs, right? Being murdered. It is just mind-boggling, right? Just mind-boggling. But this is the guy that Trump said, okay, we're gonna pardon this guy because, we've got to tell these right-wing crazies. I mean, the really crazy crazies. We've got to tell them that we'll take care of you. Just be there for the Trumpmeister. Pretty strange stuff. So where do you think Melania is, and how far do you think that they can push this thing?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
In other words, how many right-wingers are going to hang on and wait for the pardon versus flip? It's quite an equation. And welcome back. A couple of other stories in the news here that I wanted to share with you. Actually, this is fascinating. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA spent $75 million, which is, by the way, more money than they spent on home rebuilding grants to all the citizens of Puerto Rico. They spent $75 million, gave it to Carnival Cruise Lines to dock a half-empty cruise ship off the coast of Puerto Rico for 4 months for the convenience of somebody, contractors, I guess. In its rush to secure, this is Babylon's sister over at Democratic Underground. Oh no, this is thinkprogress.org, actually, is where this came from. In its rush to secure private sector boat housing for relief workers, FEMA funneled $75 million to the Panama-based cruise line on a contract that billed the government more than twice as much per head as the company charges paying customers, contracts obtained by the Miami-based radio station WLRN show. The ugly optics of the Carnival boondoggle are exacerbated by news that FEMA used less than half of the onboard housing capacity it paid the company to secure. The news of the half-empty $75 million cruise ship that FEMA called a floating hotel comes hard on the heels of a fresh estimate of the death toll from the storm, which is, it's looking like 5,000 or 6,000 people died. It's pretty amazing. I mean, it's genuinely pretty amazing. Bill in Sebastian, Florida. Hey, Bill, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good morning, Tom. Or good afternoon. I was watching C-SPAN this morning, and it seems to me that they've been giving an awful lot of coverage to the Heritage Foundation as well as the Weekly Standard. And sure enough, this morning, they had some editors from the Weekly Standard with Bill Kristol and Fred Barnes. And with Fred Barnes being there at the caucus, the caucus room, the dinner they had that night.
Fred Barnes was not at that dinner.
Oh, he wasn't at that?
No. Yep. So much for that. Okay. Sorry to burst your bubble, but Fred Barnes was not at that dinner. Okay, Wisconsin has seen the largest middle-class decline of any state. This was a study from the Pew Charitable Trust. And they found that Wisconsin experienced the biggest decline in middle-class households in the country in the 3 years between 2000 and 2013. They dropped from 54% of households, the percentage of households in the middle class, from 54.6, more than half, to 48.9. It's a 14% decline in median household income. And it turns out the manufacturing jobs, this is Mark Levine, a professor of history, or maybe it's Levine. I think it's Levine. He said, it turns out the manufacturing jobs aren't paying what they used to anymore, and a big chunk of that is because of the deunionization that's occurred. In the late 1960s, an estimated 35% of Wisconsin's total workforce, 50% of manufacturing workers are unionized. Today, it's 11%. He says, in Wisconsin, we've obviously gone the opposite way for the last three or four years. Yeah, thanks Scott Walker and the Koch brothers for that. We'll be right back. Bunch of other stuff in the news here, but Sandy, you have some thoughts on what's happened with Melania?
Yeah, Tom, it's just my assessment, just an observation that Melania, I think she knows the nefarious part of Trump. She knows a lot more than we think. And probably all these investigations, she knows that they're getting closer and closer. Now that would create an awful lot of stress on her as it gets closer, because I do think that she's a fragile woman. She is shallow. What stress does to you after a while is you don't look too good anymore after that. It will act on you physically in your appearance. I think she's having an old-fashioned nervous breakdown and does not want to be seen.
That's entirely possible. Another possibility that just occurred to me based on what you were saying. I mean, she's very concerned about her looks. She's a supermodel, or was. Is maybe she's having plastic surgery. She's in her 50s. You know, maybe she had an eye job or something, and she's just, you know, recovering from it. That would be not uncommon. But you're talking about, you know, she knows what's going on. I mean, that a lot of us believed, and I continue to believe, that when Martha Mitchell was dragged off to that hotel room and doped up by that psychiatrist, that it was because she knew too much. You know, and that's why the FBI agent pulled the phone out of the wall when she was calling the reporter. And, you know, so, you know, could it be that Melania knows too much? You know, could it be that Melania is actually in trouble? I don't know. You know, it's you know.
Yeah. I mean, you can only keep so many secrets from your spouse. If anything else, you will overhear. And they've been together now for many years.
Yeah, 10 years.
That she would have been privileged to something.
Yeah, 10 or 12 years, however many years they've been married. And that's the other thing, is that we don't know about any prenup with Melania, but both his previous wives, both Ivana and Marla Maples, he had prenups that said, in one case it was 3 years, I think it was Marla Maples, and it was 4 years with Ivana, that they had to be faithful to each other during that period of time. And it turns out that we're now learning that he was not faithful to Marla Maples in the last few months, but neither was Marla Maples. Marla Maples had an affair with the gardener, her bodyguard, 2 months before the end of the prenup. And as a result of that, Donald Trump sued her, and she only got $1 million out of his estate, you know, for the separation, because she was unfaithful to him. Well, it turns out he was unfaithful to her too. Now we know this. It was not known when she adjudicated that. And we also don't know what the terms of, you know, if Melania has a prenup, we have no idea what's in that. And if that was like, you must be faithful to each other for 3 years, the whole Stormy Daniels thing blew that up, and that might account for why Michael Cohen was so aggressively passing out money to women who were getting it on with President Spanky. So,
but then Melania comes out ahead, though. If they had that kind of agreement, then you would think that Melania would divorce him because he was the one that broke the prenup.
Right. So if she comes to him and she says, okay, I'm over it, you know, don't touch me, you cretin, and I'm divorcing you, and I've got the goods on you, and then he turns to somebody near him and says, you know, I'm the most powerful man in the world. Will nobody rid me of this meddlesome wife? You know, paraphrasing Shakespeare or Hamlet, and you know, somebody decides that you know, just like with Martha Mitchell, okay, it's time to hustle Melania off someplace and shoot her up with enough sedatives, and hey, let's put her in the hospital for a week, and you know, I don't know, it just seems totally weird. I mean, you know,
now we're going into conspiracy theory, Tom.
Oh, yeah, or curiosity. I mean, I'm not asserting any of these things. I'm just saying Martha Mitchell's story taught us that when a spouse in the White House starts talking to the press or starts talking too much or just simply knows too much, that they can end up in a psychiatric facility drugged up and goofy and incapable of communicating with the public. And, you know, so there's, you know, that's an old Republican value that goes back to Nixon. And keep in mind, the people who are advising Nixon, like Roger Stone, and, you know, are advising Trump. This is, you know, who knows what's going on here? Sandy, thank you for the call. Thanks for listening to WCPT there in Downers Grove, Illinois. Who knows? I don't know. It's could it be? You know, could it be that Melania is actually a mole in the Trump organization and they found out? Could it be? Who knows? I don't know. Anyhow, it's 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
In just a moment, right here on the True People's Media, the Thom Hartmann Program, talk media for the rest of us. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back by Thom Hartmann. This is from the introduction titled The Battle to Save Democracy. Excuse me. On September 2nd, 2009, the transnational pharmaceutical giant Pfizer pled guilty to multiple criminal felonies. It had been marketing drugs in a way that may well have led to the deaths of people, and that definitely led physicians to prescribe and patients to use pharmaceuticals in a way that for which they were not intended. Because Pfizer is a corporation, a legal abstraction, really, it couldn't go to jail like fraudster Bernie Madoff or killer John Dillinger. Instead, it paid a $1.2 billion criminal fine to the U.S. government, the biggest in history, as well as an additional $1 billion in civil penalties. The total settlement was more than $2.3 billion, another record. None of Pfizer's executives, decision makers, stockholders, owners, or employees saw even 5 minutes of the inside of a police station or a jail. Most Americans don't even know about this huge and massive crime, nor do they know that the criminal never spent a day in jail. But they do know that in the autumn of 2004, Martha Stewart was convicted of lying to investigators about her sale of stock in another pharmaceutical company. Her crime cost nobody their life, but she famously was escorted off to a women's prison. Had she been a corporation instead of a human being, odds are there would not have even been an investigation. Yet over the past century, and particularly the past 40 years, corporations have repeatedly asserted that they are, in fact, persons, and therefore eligible for the human rights protections of the Bill of Rights. In 2009, the right-wing advocacy group Citizens United argued before the Supreme Court that they had the First Amendment right to free speech and to influence elections through the production and distribution of a slasher documentary designed to destroy Hillary Clinton's ability to win the Democratic nomination. Some political observers assert that they did this in part because they believed that a black man whose first name sounded like Osama and whose middle name was Hussein could never, ever possibly win against a Republican, no matter how poor a candidate they put up. In that, they were following on a 2003 case before the Supreme Court in which Nike claimed it had the First Amendment right to lie in its corporate marketing, a variation of the First Amendment right of free speech. Corporations haven't limited their grasp to the First Amendment. Pretty much any and virtually every amendment that could be used to further corporate interests has been fair game. As you'll learn in this book, in previous decades, a chemical company took to the Supreme Court a case asserting its Fourth Amendment right to privacy from the EPA, snooping into its illegal chemical discharges. Other corporations have asserted Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, as well as asserting the 14th Amendment, passed after the Civil War to strip slavery from the Constitution, asserting that it protects their right against discrimination by a local community that doesn't want them building a toxic waste incinerator, commercial hog operations, or superstores. If this trend continues, it's probably just a matter of time before a corporation claims the Second Amendment right to bear arms anywhere, anytime, and your credit card company's bill collector shows up at your home with a sidearm. This legal situation is not only bizarre, but also quite the opposite of the visions for this country held by the founders of the nation and the framers of the Constitution. They were sufficiently worried about corporate power that they didn't even include in the Constitution the word corporation, intending instead that the states should tightly regulate corporate behavior, which the states did quite well until just after the Civil War. The American Revolution, you'll learn in this book, was in fact provoked by the misbehavior of a British corporation. Our nation was founded in an anti-corporate power fury. The most significant and oft-quoted precedent of the turning point of corporate power in America began just after the Civil War. It rested on a constitutional amendment successfully written and passed by a group of radical Republicans after the Civil War. That's what they called themselves, radical Republicans, to take slavery out of the Constitution. Given that today's Republican Party has, largely since the robber baron era of the 1880s, been the party of big business and the very rich, it's a bit difficult for some people to get their minds around the possibility that the Republican Party started out as a reform party, that for nearly 70 years, from before Abraham Lincoln until just after Theodore Roosevelt left the party to start a third party, had a strong progressive wing. But the Republican Party did. Although Lincoln was, by today's standards, a moderate Republican, he was still anti-slavery, pro-middle class, and pro-labor. In fact, he famously said labor is superior to capital because it precedes capital. Nobody has wealth until somebody makes something. And he was the first president both to use the word strike in public and to actually stop police and private armies from killing and beating strikers. And just like in today's mainstream Democratic Party, where there's a progressive minority that always seems to be pushing the edges, in the Republican Party of the 1800s, there was a very, even by today's standards, progressive faction. The radical Republicans were a splinter group that emerged in a big way from the Republican Party at its founding in 1854. And just after the Civil War in 1866, they gained a majority among Republicans in the House of Representatives, where they had a powerful influence until the faction disintegrated in the 1870s during the presidency of Ulysses S. Grant. They supported the absolute right of freed slaves to vote and participate in government. It goes on from there. Unequal protection, corporate power. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Some interesting tweets in response to my wondering where Melania is. Ed Ezzy says, my theory about Melania's whereabouts, they got a look-alike model, perform plastic surgery. They're giving her speech lessons to sound and look like Melania, and Trump shipped Melania to a gulag with Putin's help because she hates him and will make him look bad. Okay. Rick in Canada says, Melanie, or Melania, spooky that they just recently unveiled wax figures. Then Donald Trump points to a window. There she is. Pence mumbles, mother. D'Souza is despicable, but he was convicted of campaign finance fraud. Now he's the new 2020 campaign chief. Is he a lawyer? Okay. No one cares, my friend. We're all going to die from global warming. No, I'm not going to go there. And Jesse McLaren tweets a picture of Kim Kardashian standing next to Trump, next to the desk, and says they've recast Melania. Right. Bob in Crystal Lake, Illinois. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Yeah, I just called in. I like the show. And, you know, one of the theory is she's just out waiting a old, fat guy to die. I mean, she's married to a billionaire. I don't know what her prenup is. I don't know what her estate plan is, but she may just outweigh them. A lot of European males stray even more than in North America, and she just weighed them out. She doesn't care anymore.
Yeah,
she's raising her kid.
Well, that may well be the case. And that makes a lot of sense. Although you would think that as First Lady of the United States, that she would, that she and Donald would want her to, you know, not go invisible, not become the subject of inquiries and conspiracy theories and all that other kind of stuff. So that's, you know,
but when she gets, when they put a microphone in front of her, she's copying somebody else's speech. She has dumb ideas. She's not very eloquent, even although she's more eloquent than her husband. But it's not. Maybe she doesn't want to play anymore.
I think, you know, yeah, I don't think that she's any dummy. I mean, you know, all the evidence I've seen is that she's actually a very smart woman. You know, she speaks multiple languages. She's, I don't think you get to be where she is without having some street smarts, even if it's a kind of a wily kind of wisdom. But you know the theory that an earlier person called in and said maybe she's having a nervous breakdown, just good old-fashioned nervous breakdown, that would account for a week in the hospital and 2 weeks nobody's seen her. I mean, you know, who knows? I wish her well. I mean, this is not a nya kind of thing. I'm concerned. Bob, thanks for the call. Judy in Lombard, Illinois. Hey, Judy, your thoughts?
Well, my theory is they gave her the option. You either stay here under guard and we won't let you out, or they shipped her back to her own land where they are keeping her and Barron together and out of the public eye, and they're not going to let them back. Because, like you said, she's not stupid, and her child means more to her than anything else. And I don't think they would do anything like they did to Martha Mitchell, but I think she's not here. I think they shipped her out of the country because Putin and them, they'll keep guards around her, and she'll never get back in.
So you think she's been shipped out of the country? That's interesting. I mean, there are people who are speculating that she's been shipped back to New York, that she's in Trump Tower.
No, I think they went way past that, because if she's in New York, they'll dig deep enough and they'll find out she's there. And if they even shipped her out of the country, they will find out eventually. But I don't think they harmed her. I think they just shipped her out. Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating to speculate because, you know, it's not. And thank you, Judy, for the call. You're welcome.
And it's not just the question of where's Melania. You have to keep in mind, this is in a larger context. Her husband has been accused, or people around her husband have been accused of multiple felonies having to do with activities that involve her husband. Several of them have pled guilty to felonies that involve her husband. Others have avoided having to plead guilty or have pled guilty to very small charges in exchange for testimony against her husband. So here we have, you know, the Trump crime family. I mean, this may be the most inelegant criminal operation ever to run out of the White House. We thought Nixon was bad and clumsy with all his bribes and everything that, you know, he got all caught up in. But, you know, this is worse. And, you know, is it possible that Melania knows something that got her in trouble? Is it possible that she wants to talk? Is it possible that she's even been caught up with Mueller? I don't know what the limits are on whether a wife can testify against her husband. But, you know, is this part of the Trump corruption scandal, the whole Trump crime family scandal, for that matter? Rich in Greenwood, Indiana. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, thanks. I would make sure that everybody remembers the Dutch public broadcasting documentary. Their name is Zembla, Z-E-M-B-L-A, and their documentary is called The Dubious Friends of Donald Trump. Let's everybody know about that while we still have an open internet.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw that. It's a pretty amazing investigative piece. It's basically about Trump and all these guys from the mafia. Yep,
there it is. You know, he's just... Anyway, the thing that I wanted to offer is you had described Martha Mitchell's plight. You were saying stuff that I didn't know about.
I was just reading from the Wikipedia page, by the way. I mean, you know, I remember it being much more lurid. I suspect that Republicans have tamped it down a lot on Wikipedia.
Well, the thing that I wanted to offer as this idea is that there's so much that we are ignorant of our own political history. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that there is a Watergate exhibit now since 2011 at the Richard M. Nixon Presidential Library in California. And I really wonder how much they're willing to disclose in that thing. But the point of wondering about these things out loud is that there is, of course, also a Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in California. And here are two opportunities of these museums of historical record that are available to the public. And how about we get busy and ask for a whole lot of truth-telling out of these things. Let's know about Watergate. Let's know about the discovery of the counterintelligence program in 1971. That's for Nixon.
Well, the big one for Nixon would be in 1968 during that election when you know, Nixon talked with Everett Dirksen on the phone about, or excuse me, when LBJ talked with Everett Dirksen on the phone about how Nixon personally was committing treason by blowing up his peace talks with South Vietnam.
Absolutely.
And the same thing with Reagan in 1980 with the Iranians. You know, you hold the hostages, make Jimmy Carter look bad, it'll get me elected, and then I'll sell you whatever you want. And that's exactly what he did.
Exactly. And so this is this opportunity for, you know, showing the Republican playbook of going dirty with a foreign...
I'm with you. Rich, yeah. I'm absolutely with you. I want to get a few more callers in here, though, but, you know, spot on. Sasha in Kent, Washington. Hey, Sasha. What's on your mind?
I think I know what happened to Melania.
Okay.
I think it was domestic violence. I think he hit her.
Well, this is a guy whose first wife, Ivana, wrote or accused him in the divorce proceedings of marital rape, of violent rape.
Wow.
So, you know, I mean, you know, Ivana has since walked that back in public, but, you know, that was probably a demand made by Michael Cohen. Uh-huh. But so he has a history of, at least according to his first wife, pre-walk back, he has a history of violence against women. So, yeah, so you think he might have hit her and she's just not going to come out in public until the black eye is gone kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well, it's a very real possibility in a lot of abused women. You know, that's a not uncommon thing. Thank you, Sasha.
People have felt she looked like she was singing a cry for help in several
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Harrison in Seattle. Hey, Harrison, your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I think you know, the question really should be, what about the child? You know, I mean,
Barron Trump,
12-year-old boy, Barron Trump, and, you know, why not just file a Child Protective Services investigation on him, and probably you'd find out real quick where she is.
Except that nobody's going to do that on the president's son, you know. It's...
But they're the party of family values.
Oh, yes, I forgot. Yeah.
Mike Pence should be all over this.
Yeah, there you go.
It's about the kids.
There you go. Anything's possible. Harrison, thanks for the call. Mark in St. Paul, listening on KTNF. You had some thoughts on this, Mark?
Well, I have a different theory, I believe, that like Trump before her, Melania grew up in the Soviet Union, or, you know, under Melania actually grew up in Slovenia, but under Soviet control.
Right.
Now Russian control. Vladimir Putin worked that area of the world back in those days, and it's quite possible that the Soviets and now the Russians are sending women to this country to latch on to young politicians and get themselves in the door, either in Congress or the Senate or, God forbid, the White House. And once here, and look what's happened.
So you think
latches on to young Donald Trump, and suddenly he's president, and he can't seem to do anything against Russia. He can't find a way to invoke sanctions that are voted on almost unanimously by Congress. It's just amazing what he's been unable to do. And here's Melania, a former, you know, a model that came to this country under questionable circumstances, like Ivana before her. It doesn't take too much imagination to think that Vladimir Putin couldn't have thought this up.
Huh. So you think that the sleeper agent working on behalf of the Russians or interests in that part of the world anyway, whether it's the oligarchs or whether it's, you know, Kazakhstan, or actually you've got the UAE and Saudi Arabia deeply burrowed into Donald's business too, that Melania actually is the sleeper cell, as it were, rather than Donald. That's very interesting, yeah. Okay, thank you, Mark. The conspiracy theory emerges. Suzette, your thoughts, and then I got to hit a break here. What's up?
Well, I hate to put a damper on things, but didn't she just have kidney surgery a couple weeks ago?
She did, and it was the kind of surgery where you cut off the blood flow to a benign cyst, and it causes the cyst to die up and shrivel up and go away. And what we know from nephrologists, from kidney surgeons, is that it's a surgery that's typically 1 day in and out and 2 or 3 days to recover, and all is well. And instead, she went in and she was in there for a whole week, and now it's been 3 weeks and nobody's seen her.
Well, I doubt it has anything to do with Russia. As much as I think Trump is a bad person and a chump, I'm worried that we're getting into Fox News territory with all the conspiracy stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes it's, thank you, Suzette, for the call. Sometimes it's fun to just speculate about things. But, you know, I think that I'm frankly concerned. I mean, you know, if this is like the Martha Mitchell Watergate thing, if Melania knows something and Donald's trying to keep her shut up, that's serious stuff.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
And particularly given what happened in the Nixon White House when Roger Stone was around, we have to take this seriously, I think. And welcome back. Jerry Jones. Oh, this is interesting. Jerry Jones is the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. And he has testified that Donald Trump persuaded the NFL to write this rule that any black player who comes out and takes the knee during the national anthem, their team is going to lose 15 yards or whatever it is. Jerry Jones testified under oath that the President of the United States violated 18 U.S. Code 227 and specifically told him what policy he wanted and said it was important because it was good for him politically. And what the law says, Code 227, wrongfully influencing a private entity's employment decisions by a member of Congress or an officer or employee of the legislative or executive branch. Whoever being a covered government person with intent to influence solely or on the basis of partisan political affiliation, an employment decision or employment practice of any private entity shall be fined for this title or imprisoned for not more than 15 years or both, and may be disqualified from holding any office, honor, trust, or profit under the United States. Covered government person includes senator or representative, a delegate, resident commissioner, an employee of either House of Congress, the president, vice president, an employee of the United States Senate, et cetera. So that's the law, 15 years. And you know, he implicates Trump in the crime. He says Trump told him not to let go of it because it was good for Trump politically. This is in the Colin Kaepernick case. This is very interesting. This Sean King tweeted this kind of a bombshell, you know, for lack of a better word. I mean, this is serious, serious stuff. So we have to, you know, ask ourselves, where is this going? Meanwhile, Robert Reich has written this brilliant piece, 20 of Trump's biggest broken promises. Number one, he said he'd cut your taxes, and the super rich like him would pay more. That was a lie. Super rich got a huge tax cut. You and me, not so much. Number two, he promised to close so-called special interest loopholes. If anything, he has been creating them. Number three, he said he'd repeal Obamacare and replace it with something beautiful. Now, you bought that, but he just repealed it. He told you he'd invest $1 trillion in our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Instead, he gave $1.5 trillion to his billionaire buddies and put it on the national credit card. He said he'd drain the Washington swamp. Right. He said he'd use his business experience to whip the White House into shape. Right, yeah. He told you he'd bring down drug prices by making deals with drug companies. Bought any drugs recently? He told you he'd stop foreign lobbyists from raising money for American elections. Right. Well, Russia's laundering money through the NRA for Donald Trump, for example. He told you, I'm not going to cut Social Security like every other Republican, and I'm not going to cut Medicare or Medicaid. Right. Well, they did cut Social Security, and they did cut Medicare, and they did cut Medicaid, at least the administrative budgets, to all those agencies with the GOP tax scam. He promised 6 weeks of paid maternity leave to any mother with a newborn child. Right. Instead, he gave a giant tax cut to corporations. He said he won't bomb Syria. And then he bombed Syria. He said he's going to build a wall against the southern border. No wall. He said all these women who accused him of sexual misconduct were going to be sued right after the election. No lawsuits. He said he'd never take vacations. He called Obama the vacationer in chief. Right. We'll be right back. Hartmann here with you, and Mario in Berwyn, Illinois. Hey, Mario, what's up?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. I'm 68. When I was 60, they removed a kidney and they removed a rib, the 10-number rib on my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I was out the next day.
Wow.
People have to be informed. People have to know that this guy is a liar. And definite, people have to know what's going on in there. By the next day, I was on the street. My wife picked me up, took me home, after has been removing a kidney and a rib.
Right.
So I got much more things to tell you, but probably you don't have time.
Yeah, well, I'd like to...
People have to be informed.
Yeah,
Be informed.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mario. Thank you. Fascinating. Fascinating. Alina in Maple Falls, Washington. Hey, Alina, what's up?
Yes, I just thought this was a little humorous twist here.
Mm-hmm.
I had read years ago, it was a book by Irving Wallace, and it was entitled The Second Lady, and it was published in 1980 and was on the New York Times bestseller list, I guess number 8.
Mm-hmm.
But it had to deal with a woman who had a striking resemblance to the First Lady, and she was in the Soviet Union. And through plastic surgery, they installed her within the White House by kidnapping the First Lady. And she was, I guess, able to glean certain secrets from within.
Whoa.
Interesting political thriller. And I guess from the mind of Irving Wallace, there you have it. It kind of goes along the same vein of, I guess, the Martha Mitchell effect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's humorous and not. I mean, that's
interesting though. So
and
I immediately thought about it when they're thinking, where is Melania?
Yeah.
So there you have it. Maybe she's kidnapped somewhere, and another woman is being installed.
God forbid, but it's a fascinating story. Alina, thank you. Thanks for the smile. Amanda in Anza, California. Amanda, your thoughts?
Tom, I was just going to tell another story that was taken from Ivana's book.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize the speaker. She had claimed that Trump had ripped out a chunk of her hair. He had apparently gotten plugs, and he wasn't happy with them, and she tittered about it. And he actually physically pulled a chunk of her hair out, like tore it out, and said, "How do you like it?" And
I remember
story
that.
was originally in the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was taken out as well. And another thing everyone should look at, which I don't know why they didn't before the election, was that documentary You've Been Trumped about his golf course in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it.
Yeah. Okay, good one. Amanda, thank you
Thanks,
for that.
Tom.
Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to AM 1352. Jay in Detroit listening on iHeartMedia. Hey, Jay, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
I think it's important to remember that Trump was asking Bill Gates a couple weeks ago the difference between HIV and HPV because he's so stupid he doesn't know the difference. So if Trump can't help but reveal himself, if he doesn't know the difference between the two, and suppose he's been sleeping with porn stars with no condom all these years.
So he very likely has HPV.
He has, I believe, and I'm just speculating like everybody else, he discovers he's got some sort of sexually transmitted disease. He gave it to Melania. She gets very angry, resulting fight. She gets beat up pretty bad, goes to the hospital to recover for the black eye. I just don't see that out of the realm of possibility. These people are vile.
Yeah, I agree. And HPV, for people who don't know, is human papillomavirus. It's kind of a wart virus. And it's the leading cause of anal cancer and throat cancer, or a leading cause of these two kinds of cancers.
And Tom, remember, she was a birther, so I don't have any pity for her,
Yeah. Well, I don't know enough about her to know if, to have a strong opinion, frankly. It seems to me like she's, a woman who thought that she bagged a billionaire and, got a lot more than she hoped for, but who knows? Jay, thank you for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Not only are we pleased to have Superbeats as an underwriter for our program, but it's a great product that I drink every day. Check it out at Tom's Beats, THOMSBEETS.com, or give them a call at 800-568-9889. Superbeats. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back by Thom Hartmann. This is from the introduction titled The Battle to Save Democracy. Excuse me. On September 2nd, 2009, the transnational pharmaceutical giant Pfizer pled guilty to multiple criminal felonies. It had been marketing drugs in a way that may well have led to the deaths of people, and that definitely led physicians to prescribe and patients to use pharmaceuticals in a way that for which they were not intended. Because Pfizer is a corporation, a legal abstraction, really, it couldn't go to jail like fraudster Bernie Madoff or killer John Dillinger. Instead, it paid a $1.2 billion criminal fine to the U.S. government, the biggest in history, as well as an additional $1 billion in civil penalties. The total settlement was more than $2.3 billion, another record. None of Pfizer's executives, decision makers, stockholders, owners, or employees saw even 5 minutes of the inside of a police station or a jail. Most Americans don't even know about this huge and massive crime, nor do they know that the criminal never spent a day in jail. But they do know that in the autumn of 2004, Martha Stewart was convicted of lying to investigators about her sale of stock in another pharmaceutical company. Her crime cost nobody their life, but she famously was escorted off to a women's prison. Had she been a corporation instead of a human being, odds are there would not have even been an investigation. Yet over the past century, and particularly the past 40 years, corporations have repeatedly asserted that they are, in fact, persons, and therefore eligible for the human rights protections of the Bill of Rights. In 2009, the right-wing advocacy group Citizens United argued before the Supreme Court that they had the First Amendment right to free speech and to influence elections through the production and distribution of a slasher documentary designed to destroy Hillary Clinton's ability to win the Democratic nomination. Some political observers assert that they did this in part because they believed that a black man whose first name sounded like Osama and whose middle name was Hussein could never, ever possibly win against a Republican, no matter how poor a candidate they put up. In that, they were following on a 2003 case before the Supreme Court in which Nike claimed it had the First Amendment right to lie in its corporate marketing, a variation of the First Amendment right of free speech. Corporations haven't limited their grasp to the First Amendment. Pretty much any and virtually every amendment that could be used to further corporate interests has been fair game. As you'll learn in this book, in previous decades, a chemical company took to the Supreme Court a case asserting its Fourth Amendment right to privacy from the EPA, snooping into its illegal chemical discharges. Other corporations have asserted Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, as well as asserting the 14th Amendment, passed after the Civil War to strip slavery from the Constitution, asserting that it protects their right against discrimination by a local community that doesn't want them building a toxic waste incinerator, commercial hog operations, or superstores. If this trend continues, it's probably just a matter of time before a corporation claims the Second Amendment right to bear arms anywhere, anytime, and your credit card company's bill collector shows up at your home with a sidearm. This legal situation is not only bizarre, but also quite the opposite of the visions for this country held by the founders of the nation and the framers of the Constitution. They were sufficiently worried about corporate power that they didn't even include in the Constitution the word corporation, intending instead that the states should tightly regulate corporate behavior, which the states did quite well until just after the Civil War. The American Revolution, you'll learn in this book, was in fact provoked by the misbehavior of a British corporation. Our nation was founded in an anti-corporate power fury. The most significant and oft-quoted precedent of the turning point of corporate power in America began just after the Civil War. It rested on a constitutional amendment successfully written and passed by a group of radical Republicans after the Civil War. That's what they called themselves, radical Republicans, to take slavery out of the Constitution. Given that today's Republican Party has, largely since the robber baron era of the 1880s, been the party of big business and the very rich, it's a bit difficult for some people to get their minds around the possibility that the Republican Party started out as a reform party, that for nearly 70 years, from before Abraham Lincoln until just after Theodore Roosevelt left the party to start a third party, had a strong progressive wing. But the Republican Party did. Although Lincoln was, by today's standards, a moderate Republican, he was still anti-slavery, pro-middle class, and pro-labor. In fact, he famously said labor is superior to capital because it precedes capital. Nobody has wealth until somebody makes something. And he was the first president both to use the word strike in public and to actually stop police and private armies from killing and beating strikers. And just like in today's mainstream Democratic Party, where there's a progressive minority that always seems to be pushing the edges, in the Republican Party of the 1800s, there was a very, even by today's standards, progressive faction. The radical Republicans were a splinter group that emerged in a big way from the Republican Party at its founding in 1854. And just after the Civil War in 1866, they gained a majority among Republicans in the House of Representatives, where they had a powerful influence until the faction disintegrated in the 1870s during the presidency of Ulysses S. Grant. They supported the absolute right of freed slaves to vote and participate in government. It goes on from there. Unequal protection, corporate power. If a stone saw a guided her.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back, Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us, Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of Democracy at Work, author most recently of Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, Essays on the Global Economic Meltdown, democracyatwork.info, and rdwolff.com are the websites. You can tweet him at Democracy at Work, WRK, or at Prof Wolff, WOLFF. And Professor Wolff, I saw a promo. We've got Free Speech TV now on Sling, and Louise and I have Sling. And so we popped it up, and there was a promo of you for a show that you're doing on Free Speech TV. Tell us about that.
Well, we've been doing this for a few years. It's a weekly program devoted to kind of looking what has happened in the last week that merits some attention because of its importance, particularly in terms of economics. It's both the U.S., it's global, and it's a kind of critical perspective that you won't see in the mainstream media, and it's a way for people to keep up with the economic changes that, at least in our view, are the most important to keep track of.
That's great. That's absolutely great. Now, I noticed that the Fed has proposed changing the Volcker rule, and I've got a couple of questions around this. Number one, for people who don't know what the Volcker rule was, can you recap that, the essence of it? Number two, I thought that the Volcker rule was part of a legislative process. I thought it was part of Dodd-Frank, and therefore it wouldn't be the Fed making those decisions. It would be a regulatory agency unless the Fed is taking that role. So I'm not sure how that works. And then, of course, the third question, the larger question, what will this mean for all of us? What does this mean to the American economy?
Okay, let's go through basically what the Volcker rule is about. The crash back in 1929 was widely believed to have involved a basic maneuver of banks. And here's what I mean by maneuver. They accept deposits, both of individuals, that commercial banks do, of individuals and of companies. And they're supposed to be safekeepers. You put your money in the bank because it's holding it for you. It is acting in your interest to hold your money for you. And at the very least, it has to be very sure, so the understanding went, not to take risks with your money. It isn't their money. What the banks did before 1929 was basically interpret this understanding in a way most profitable to them, leading them to make risky investments in corporations and projects with the depositors' money. And when the crash came in 1929 and we went through the Great Depression of the 1930s, one of the results was a banking act, it was called, that specifically placed a wall between commercial banks and investment banks.
This is Glass-Steagall.
That's right. Named after the two legislators who pushed it through Congress. That's right. And the law basically said you can't use depositors' money for risky investments. If you want to make risky investments, you as a bank have to go out and solicit investors to give you money for that purpose. That's called an investment bank. You can't function as a commercial bank taking risky bets with other people's money, namely the individuals and businesses. Glass-Steagall existed, but from the very beginning, banks went to work to evade it. They made a lot of profits by using the depositors' money. Remember, then as now, they don't pay you very much for your deposit. Sometimes they pay you nothing or very low, and then they can make big returns if they invest and if it works out. So the banks wanted to be able to do that. They evaded Glass-Steagall, they watered it down, and then finally in the 1990s, under Clinton as president, they repealed it, led by the biggest banks in the country who were desperate to do that. Literally 6 or 7 years after they did that, we had the next great crash, 2008. Out of that came the Volcker rule, the Dodd-Frank, and a variety of steps taken to reinstitute the Glass-Steagall idea, namely that banks cannot use depositors' money for risky bets. Mr. Volcker, the former head of the Federal Reserve, took the lead in pushing for this because he could see, as everybody else who pays attention could, that this was a terribly dangerous procedure. No sooner did he get it through over the opposition of the big banks than they went to work, lobbying, public relations, buying politicians, all the rest, to once again evade it, water it down, or if they can, get rid of it. Where we are right now is they're about to water it down. They're about to get the Federal Reserve and Congress and Mr. Trump, who's already on board for all of these things, to let them be freer than they were supposed to be now in the light of two major crashes, to let them once again do various kinds of dangerous investments with less overview, less oversight than was intended after the 2008 crash. If I might, Tom, a comment here that oughtn't to be necessary but is. Our capitalist system has this peculiar, really irrational business. Banks, like other companies, abuse their positions of power and wealth. When they do it too much and we have a crash, we impose regulations. But we allow them to keep on making money, and we allow them to use the profits they get to undo the very regulations. Sooner or later, they succeed. And then again, abuses start. And then again, we re-regulate them. This is an absurd drama, very dangerous for society, lots of victims, as the two great depressions of the last 100 years have taught us, but we don't seem to be willing or able to face this repeated kind of craziness by making the sorts of changes that ought to have been made the first time, certainly the second time, but instead we seem to be heading for yet a third time.
Yeah. So how would you expect this to play out if this watering down? Well, first of all, is this the effort to water this down? This is successful now, right? Or is this just a Fed proposal?
All the signs indicate that this is now going to go through. It is not a complete getting rid of the Volcker rule. It's basically, if you read the fine print, It means that where before banks couldn't take these kinds of risky steps, if they dared to do it and were caught doing it, they would suffer penalties, exposure, and so on. What this new adjustment is the banks are free to do what they want. The burden is now on the government, the Federal Reserve and other branches of government, to find that they're doing it, catch them at doing that, prove that they're doing it. So it puts the burden of holding them back from these dangerous speculations and risky investments. It puts the burden on the government, not on them, the way Volcker had originally intended. And remember, Volcker was a widely respected head of the Federal Reserve, somebody who had been a banker all his life. Even he could see what they're now watering down. And so my feeling is we're just going to do it all again. That's why I went over the history. We're going to now see banks desperate to make more investments that are more profitable than what they can do in the difficult economy we face. And so they're going to use this freedom that they've been fighting like crazy for in order to make those investments, and we're going to face risky, dangerous investments, and that is going to likely do what it has done over and over again, namely bring us into another economic crisis where yet another Mr. Volcker, by a different name, of course, will stand up and tell us again what Mr. Volcker already told us after the last crash, et cetera,
right,
et
which
cetera.
Is you can't trust the banksters.
It's a pathetic display. It really is.
Yeah, and how quickly do you think? I mean, by the way, this is following on the. You said the banks are having a difficult environment. The big six banks just reported the largest quarterly profit in the history of world banking.
Absolutely, they've been doing real well, partly because they have found their ways around the few limited controls that Dodd-Frank, et cetera, put on them, and partly they were major beneficiaries of the tax cut last December.
So how quickly might this play out? I mean, if this is setting up the possibility of the next great 1929 style, 2007 style crash, when would we know? When would we see the early warning signs? What would it look like?
Well, I wish I could answer that question, but here's the truth. Nobody can. Nobody knows exactly how and when. Too many variables are involved here. I will tell you this. Since the history of capitalism becoming a major economy in England and then spreading over the world, roughly 300 years, we have had an economic downturn every 4 to 7 years on average. The last big downturn was 2009 by most calculations. So if you add 4 to 7 years, the answer is we're already overdue for a downturn. Anything, the crisis in Italy, the inability of countries like Turkey and Argentina to pay back the loans they took out at the low interest rates of the last several years, any of these things that are currently agitating the world economy, and I won't even mention Mr. Trump's on-again, off-again threats to world trade, any of these things, if they get underway, will be magnified by the risky bets made by our banks.
Yeah, hang on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Professor Richard Wolff with us, the economist, co-founder, author of Democracy at Work, democracywork.info and rdwolff.com. Professor, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Glad for the opportunity.
My pleasure. And welcome back. Oh, we got a bunch of people who want to weigh in on a whole variety of things. Chris in Ridgecrest, California. Hey, Chris, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Hey, I wanted to pick the professor's brain, but he's gone, so I'll pick yours instead.
Okay.
My nephew and I were having a discussion over dinner, and he's getting into kind of a lot of stock things, and I wanted to try and give him food for thought about possibly, democratic socialism or something like that. And I started telling him, I thought stocks should be available to the employees of companies first in order to keep the incentive to keep the company together and things like that. and he made the statement that you have to take your stock public eventually. The company isn't worth anything. And I thought that doesn't quite sound right. And I wanted to get your or Richard Wolff's take on it.
Well,
does a company have to go public with their stock in order to be worth something? I mean,
Koch Industries is a privately held company. You cannot buy stock in Koch Industries. It's one of the largest in the United States. The same is true of Bechtel Corporation. Bechtel Corporation, at one time, I don't know if it's still the case, I doubt it is, but 15, 20 years ago, Bechtel Corporation was the largest contractor literally in the world. And it's a private corporation. You can't buy stock in Bechtel. It's owned by Stephen Bechtel and his family.
Yeah. How would you go about correcting or giving him food for thought that idea is wrong? What talking points would
I would just point that out. Blackwater is a privately held company.
That's great.
I mean, there's no shortage of big successful companies that don't participate in stock markets. And over the last couple of years, there have been a number of companies that have what's called gone private. That is to say that they bought all their own stock out of the stock market and then ceased to participate, because they didn't want to follow SEC rules. They wanted to be Ronin, renegades. And the companies that are in my mind right now, I'm not absolutely certain they're the ones that went private. So I'm not going to go through the list of names, but anybody who pays close attention to markets would probably know right off the top of their head. But there've been a few. I mean, this happens from time to time. But we've got some very, very large privately held companies in the United States. So, I mean, taking a company public is a way to raise an enormous amount of money really rapidly. And particularly if the company is good and has got, a lot of sizzle as well as a lot of stake, and then you get these IPOs that are just, breathtaking. But it's basically a way of raising money. The owners of the company are saying, okay, we're going to go from 100% ownership down to maybe 3% or 5% or 9% or whatever it's going to be, and we're going to sell the rest of the company off to the public, and that money then becomes money that the company can use to grow with. Now, privately held companies, instead of selling stock to raise money, borrow money or simply accumulate profits and use those accumulated profits. And with Koch Industries, well, we just don't know because it's a private company. Their books are not available to us. So we don't know if they're issuing bonds that are being, sold in a private marketplace, or if they're just so insanely profitable, they're able to leverage their own profit into, developing new companies and buying other organizations and things. But look at all the brands associated with Koch Industries. Again, I don't want to get the wrong one, so I don't have the list in front of me. But there's a whole bunch of common household brands of products in the United States, particularly paper products, that you can't buy stock in those companies. Chris, thanks for the call, and thanks for watching us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This hour of our program brought to you by X-Chair Thom, T-H-O-M, xchairthom.com, the X-Chair. John in Elmwood, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I have to disagree with you trying to trash on Melania Trump, the First Lady.
I'm not trying to trash on her, John. I'm concerned. She's been gone for 3 weeks. The last time I saw anything like this, it was Martha Mitchell in the 1970s. It was just, you know, it concerns me, right? Look at what was done to Martha Mitchell. Look at what this guy did to his first wife. You know, Ivana, when she sued him, she said he pulled her hair out, he raped her. I mean, inquiring minds want to know what's going on. He is, after all, our president. She is our first lady. You would think that, you know, the American people have a right to know what's going on. Chris in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, apropos of the free speech TV caller, did Sprayberry Travel ever go public? Your old
No,
travel
Sprayberry just got, actually not just, it was 2-3 years ago, was sold to a multi-billion-dollar travel company. So they're still there, I think. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You missed out on that, huh, Tom?
Yeah, Louise and I sold our stock in the company in '86. We started in '83. We sold out in '86 to our employees, and then our employees, you know, made out really, really well when they sold to this billion-dollar company. God bless them.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing with this Trump, and you and I would agree that these are Trump lies, but I'm 28 years old and I'm a millennial, and there is this kind of water that I'm seeing some millennials and Generation Y that they're swimming in, and this is this notion of like Donald Trump being the meme queen or the meme king, M-E-M-E. Like if you go and virtue signal that you want to build the wall and then you try to get the $18 billion, all the data and the research suggests that that's not going to prevent illegal aliens because, as you said, they overstay their visas. But they will admit that while they know it won't prevent illegal immigration, that's like an $18 billion virtue signal. That's just going to represent, like, America as this fortress.
Right.
And that's kind of the strategy.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. It's not about trying to stop people from coming to this country. You want to stop people from coming to this country illegally, then all you have to do is start putting employers in prison, you know, and nobody will get hired. And you know, if you can't get a job, then you know there's a limit to how long you can freeload, and they've already made it damn near impossible for people who aren't citizens to get welfare programs. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, it seems like the intellectual shoe leather of this kind of ideology is a guy by the name of Jordan Peterson, and he's been in New York Times. He's, you know, everyone just kind of cites him where, you know, what is true is not what is demonstrably true. What is true is whatever personally, you know, benefits you here in the moment. And I don't know if you've talked about Jordan or if you wanted to give him any kind of airtime, but he seems to be the influence.
Well, perhaps more importantly, Chris, what is true is what we believe is true, right? I mean, you know, we used to believe that the Earth went around the sun, and you know, functionally, that was reality for people. You know, and Trump has been twisting reality, you know, left and right. I mean, that's his whole shtick. His lie big, lie early, and lie big, and lie often. You know, for example, you know, the FBI put somebody in my. I mean, he said this in his rally in Nashville after he had learned that the FBI, nobody put any spies into the Trump campaign. You know, unless it was Saudi Arabia or Russia or Israel or somebody, nobody, you know, nobody in the United States was spying on Trump or his campaign. But he made it real. I mean, he believes he controls reality.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And for that slice of Americans who get all their information from hate radio and Fox so-called news, he does control reality. In the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from Michael Pollan's new book, How to Change Your Mind, what the new science of psychedelics teaches us about consciousness, dying, addiction, depression, and transcendence. This is from the prologue titled A New Door. Midway through the 20th century, two unusual new molecules, organic compounds with a striking family resemblance, exploded upon the West. In time, they would change the course of social, political, and cultural history, as well as the personal histories of the millions of people who would eventually introduce them to their brains. As it happened, the arrival of these disruptive chemistries coincided with another world historical explosion, that of the atomic bomb. There were people who compared the two events and made much of the cosmic synchronicity. Extraordinary new energies had been loosed upon the world. Things would never quite be the same. The first of these molecules was an accidental invention of science. Lysergic acid diethylamide, commonly known as LSD, was first synthesized by Albert Hoffman in 1938, shortly before physicists split the atom of uranium for the first time. Hoffman, who worked for the Swiss pharmaceutical firm Sandoz, had been looking for a drug to stimulate circulation, not a psychoactive compound. It wasn't until 5 years later, when he accidentally ingested a minuscule quantity of the new chemical, that he realized he had created something powerful, at once terrifying and wondrous. The second molecule had been around for thousands of years, though no one in the developed world was aware of it. Produced not by a chemist, by an inconspicuous little brown mushroom, this molecule, which would come to be known as psilocybin, had been used by indigenous peoples of Mexico and Central America for hundreds of years as a sacrament. Called Teotihuacan by the Aztecs, or flesh of the gods, the mushroom was brutally suppressed by the Roman Catholic Church after the Spanish conquest and driven underground. In 1955, 12 years after Albert Hoffman's discovery of LSD, a Manhattan banker and amateur mycologist named R. Gordon Wasson sampled the magic mushroom in the town of Huajalta de Jimenez in the southern Mexican state of Oaxaca. 2 years later, he published a 15-page account of the, quote, mushrooms that cause strange visions, end quote, in Life magazine, marking the moment when news of a new form of consciousness first reached the general public. Parentheses, in 1957, knowledge of LSD was mostly confined to the community of researchers and mental health professionals. People would not realize the magnitude of what had happened for several more years, but history in the West had shifted. The impact of these two molecules is hard to overestimate. The advent of LSD can be linked to the revolution in brain science that begins in the 1950s, when scientists discovered the role of neurotransmitters in the brain. The quantities of LSD measured in micrograms could produce quantities of LSD measured in micrograms could produce symptoms resembling psychosis, inspired brain scientists to search for the neurochemical basis of mental disorders previously believed to be of psychological origin. At the same time, psychedelics found their way into psychotherapy, where they were used to treat a variety of disorders, including alcoholism, anxiety, and depression. For most of the 1950s and early 60s, many in the psychiatric establishment regarded LSD and psilocybin as miracle drugs. The arrival of these two compounds is also linked to the rise of the counterculture during the 1960s, and perhaps especially to its particular tone and style. For the first time in history, the young had a rite of passage all their own, the acid trip. Instead of folding the young into the adult world, as rites of passage have always done, this one landed them in a country of the mind few adults had any idea even existed. The effect on society was, to put it mildly, disruptive. Yet by the end of the 1960s, the social and political shockwaves unleashed by these molecules seemed to dissipate. The dark side of psychedelics began to receive tremendous amounts of publicity: bad trips, psychotic breaks, flashbacks, suicides. And beginning in 1965, the exuberance surrounding these new drugs gave way to moral panic. As quickly as the culture and the scientific establishment had embraced psychedelics, they now turned sharply against them. By the end of the decade, psychedelic drugs, which had been legal in most places, were outlawed and forced underground. At least one of the 20th century's two bombs appeared to have been diffused. Then something unexpected and telling happened. Beginning in the 1990s, well out of the view of most of us, a small group of scientists, psychotherapists, and so-called psychonauts, believing that something precious had been lost from both science and culture, resolved to recover it. Today, after several decades of suppression and neglect, psychedelics are having a renaissance. A new generation of scientists, many of them inspired by their own personal experience of the compounds, are testing their potential to heal mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, trauma, and addiction. Other scientists are using psychedelics in conjunction with new brain imaging tools to explore the links between brain and mind, hoping to unravel some of the mysteries of consciousness itself. One good way to understand a complex system is to disturb it and then see what happens. By smashing atoms, a particle accelerator forces them to yield their secrets. By administering psychedelics in carefully calibrated doses, neuroscientists can profoundly disturb the normal waking consciousness of volunteers, dissolving the structures of the self and occasioning what can be described as a mystical experience. How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. Well, the plot thickens. The story gets even stranger. And tip of the hat to, oh, who was it here? I had it. Tweet. Yeah, the JJ the Santa Barbarian, who tweeted this Newsweek story back at me. Andy Haley, by the way, tweeting, "Where is Melania?" That's the hashtag. He says phrases that come to mind: rendition, protective custody, witness protection program, Martha Mitchell, nervous breakdown, Ligate, continues spousal abuse, ICE overplay, CIA black site, medically induced coma, thoughts and prayers. Okay, so anyhow, I started, an hour and a half ago talking about Martha Mitchell. Martha Mitchell was the wife of John Mitchell, who was the Attorney General in the Nixon administration, and he was the head of the campaign to reelect the president, CREEP. And when CREEP started, when CREEP was involved in the Watergate break-in and all this stuff, Martha Mitchell started speaking out. And she was concerned about this. And there was this guy, this FBI agent, ex-FBI agent. He'd left the FBI. He'd become an employee of Richard Nixon's. He was working for CREEP, the Committee to Reelect the President. And this guy, Stephen King, not the author, but the FBI, former FBI agent, according to Martha Mitchell, this is from an authorized biography by McClendon of Martha Mitchell. This is the book about Martha Mitchell. She says, after King ripped the phone from her hand, she's trying to call Helen Thomas at the Associated Press to tell her, well, here's, to tell her what's going on. In fact, here's Martha Mitchell had been complaining vaguely. This is by Jeff Stein's article from Newsweek. Martha Mitchell had been complaining vaguely to anyone who would listen about campaign operatives carrying out dirty tricks against the Democrats. She called her favorite reporter, UPI's Helen Thomas. King rushed into her bedroom, threw her back against the bed, and ripped the telephone out of the wall. The conversation ended abruptly when it appeared someone took away the phone from her hand, said Thomas. She was heard to say, "You just get away." Thomas added that when she called back, the operator told her, "Mrs. Mitchell is indisposed and cannot talk." Marcia Kramer with the New York Daily News tracked down Martha Mitchell a couple days later and wrote, and Marcia Kramer is a veteran crime reporter. She wrote, quote, "Martha Mitchell was a beaten woman," and she meant literally beaten up, "with incredible black and blue marks on her arms." A later account in McCall's magazine said that after King ripped the phone from Mitchell, he, quote, summoned a doctor who gave her a tranquilizing shot and saw to it that no more of her outgoing calls would be taken by the hotel switchboard. McClendon writes, Nixon and CREEP began spreading stories that Martha was crazy, out of control, and alcoholic, and had a breakdown. Martha then writes a letter to Parade magazine when she learns that King has been promoted to the chief of security, because she went back to her husband on the conditions that he fire King, but instead he got promoted. So she writes a letter to Parade magazine saying, King not only dealt me the most horrible experience I ever had, but inflicted bodily harm on me. In the authorized biography, it says after King ripped the phone from her hand, she related, Martha Mitchell related, she ran to another room to make a call. So here's a spouse inside the White House trying to alert the press to the evil stuff that the Nixon administration, that Richard Nixon is up to, right? The Attorney General's wife. After King ripped the phone from her hand, she related, she ran to another room to make a call. Again, she was thrown aside while the phone was disconnected. McClendon wrote, Steve King, this guy, then shoved her into her room and slammed the door. Next, Mitchell tried to get to an adjacent villa via the balcony. So she climbs out the window, climbs out on the balcony, is trying to get to the next suite over by jumping from balcony to balcony. Again, she was thrown aside while the phone was, but King ran out and pulled her back inside. She claimed he threw her down and kicked her. The next day, she slipped downstairs planning to escape, but King spotted her just as she reached a glass door. In the ensuing scuffle, Martha's left hand was cut so badly that 6 stitches were required on 2 fingers. That's when the doctor was summoned to sedate her. Before the shot took effect, she tried to get away again, according to Martha, but King saw her dashing toward the door and ran over and slapped her across the room. That was in 1973. By 1976, she was dead. At the age of 57, Martha Mitchell. Now, Stephen King, the guy that I was just telling you about who did all that to her, where is he now? Donald Trump just appointed him ambassador to Czechoslovakia. He is your ambassador to Czechoslovakia, the guy who did this to Martha Mitchell. And we're 21 days into trying to figure out whatever happened to Melania Trump. It's all very strange stuff. Anita in San Antonio. Hey, Anita, what's on your mind?
Yeah, it is very strange. They need to bring her out to the public if they don't want people to speculate.
Yeah. Yeah, and this whole thing about Stephen King, I mean, this is just beyond weird. I did not know this when I started this rant at the beginning of the show about, you know, how Stephen King abused Martha Mitchell. I didn't realize that Donald Trump has elevated him to an ambassador position. And the guy's 76 years old, by the way.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know any of that about Martha Mitchell or any of that. But I wanted to talk about the thing with Jerry Jones, who I despise.
He's the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, a billionaire in Texas, yeah.
Right, and he testified to basically that Donald Trump committed a felony.
That's correct, today, apparently. Or at least today the testimony came out. Might have been yesterday.
Wouldn't it be amazing if what takes Donald Trump down is Colin Kaepernick?
That would be amazing, because this was the Colin Kaepernick lawsuit where Jerry Jones testified.
That would be poetic justice.
That really would. That really would. You've got a keen eye for irony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita.
Right.
Great to hear from you. Thank you very much. Yep, good talking with you. John in Everett, Washington. Hey, John, you wanted to talk about the Fed?
Yes, Tom, last week I saw on Free Speech TV a very good video on a show that airs at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock our time here in the Northwest. And it's about... It's run by a guy named Pirate Television, and the fellow's name is Ed Mays, M-A-Y-S. And he has a site on YouTube that he has 203 videos on. And what he does is take videos at what's called the Seattle Town Hall, where we have excellent speakers.
Right, John, I you know, this show is not a forum for promoting other shows.
No,
I mean, what specifically are you calling about?
Your discussion with Ed Wolff and how you were talking about the Federal Reserve.
Right.
And the thing that shocked me about this whole video was that the Federal Reserve had an emergency in 2008, and they gave money to the banks. That emergency is still in effect.
That's correct. And it wasn't just the banks, by the way. They gave money to individual billionaires. They passed out $27 trillion.
Yeah, that's what this video was about, and it was just amazing. I couldn't believe the information that was coming out.
Oh, it's proof of modern monetary theory that creating money out of thin air does not debase a currency. I mean, if nothing else, it's pretty amazing. John, thanks for the call. Charles in New York City, watching us on Manhattan Neighborhood Networks, which puts us into every single household in Manhattan. Hey, Charles, thanks for finding us on your dial.
How are you?
Great.
How are you? Good. Thanks. I was calling about Professor Wolff and his comments about the lobbyists and the politicians, and I was just wondering, I searched online for my Chuck Schumer, and just trying to put some connection between money and policy that he passed, and it's really hard. I mean, he's had a long career, and I could really not find anything, linking him to, on the committees he sits on, the banking committee, or the finance, or the arms. Well, he used to sit on those committees. So I'm just wondering, over the years, have you seen, can you talk about what Chuck Schumer and money that he got from banking?
I can't. I don't know specifically about that, Charles. I would recommend you go to opensecrets.org, and you can find there exactly who gave what to whom and how much and all that kind of stuff. Dwight in Minneapolis. Hey, Dwight, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. I'm wondering, and I'd like to get your feedback on this. If Mueller writes his report and it comes back where Trump is clear of all charges, they're not going to impeach him and everything, then my question is this. First of all, that's going to pave the way for the next dictator, a despot. because Trump will beat and defeated all the so-called checks and balances.
Well, here's an even worse scenario, Dwight. What if Mueller comes out with his report and says, here's 22 crimes that we can prove were committed by Donald Trump or other members of the Trump crime family, and all of them are indictable, all of them are prosecutable, in our opinion. Here's the crimes and here's the details. And because Donald Trump has Fox so-called news, because Donald Trump has right-wing hate radio, because Donald Trump has Breitbart and the Mercer family and Shelley Adelson and the newspapers that he owns and you know, the Koch network and all this stuff, because Trump has got all that on his side, there's this whole large sector of America, about a third of America, that just, I mean, literally, you know, half of Republicans think that more than 3 million people voted illegally in the last election. Any lie Trump tells, they believe. And so, you know, he is right now, the scorched earth policy that Trump is doing is to destroy the integrity, the perception of integrity on the part of the FBI and Bob Mueller. And if he's successful in doing that, then if Bob Mueller comes out and says, yeah, here's the proof that Trump committed the crime, Trump will just say, oh, the guy is lying. And there's a lot of people who will believe him. That's going to be even more dangerous to this republic than Mueller clearing him, in my opinion.
Well, that's my concern. You know, all of the checks and balances will be defeated, and so we will be totally exposed to any dictator that decides that, you know, he wants to come and be a fascist. You know?
Yeah, I think you're right, Dwight. I think you're absolutely right. Thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. We're going to check in with Talk Media News and Bob Ney in about 4 minutes. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Viagra for your brain, the Thom Hartmann Program. Just don't tell Limbo he'll want some. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Rick in St. George, Utah. Hey, Rick, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. You wanted to talk about Martha Mitchell?
Actually, Melania, but I know you've been talking about Martha Mitchell as an example of what might be going on.
Mm-hmm.
But the leader of the Scientologists, David Muscovich, his wife, Shelley, she disappeared in 2007, and nobody has seen her since.
Really?
Really. And, you know, when I think of David Muscovich, I see a lot of correlation to Donald Trump.
Oh, except Trump is nowhere near that smart. I'm serious.
Well, an extremely powerful person who feels that rules do not apply to them.
Yeah.
So who knows how long she's going to be gone? You know, we may be sitting here in 2025 still wondering whatever happened to Melania Trump.
That's totally spooky.
It is.
I mean, that's just like totally spooky.
And
something's going on. Something's, you know, they don't go to these kind of lengths of just like total radio silence if something's not going on. And it might be something as benign as she got a facelift, or it might be, you know, that they're like you know, when that one time when George W. Bush, when things were not going well for him. In fact, it was after one of his worst news cycles. He got drunk in the TV watching room while he was watching a football game, and you know, passed out, fell on the floor. They said he ate a pretzel. Well, you know, yeah, right. He got drunk. I mean, you know, he fell off the wagon, and he got hit. You know, his injury was absolutely characteristic of the kind of thing that happens when drunks pass out, and so it could be that. And if he hadn't had a big deal meeting the next day, we never would have known. But you know, they took a picture, and then the story came out. Or actually, it was 2 days later. But with Melania, I mean, you know, who knows?
Yeah, the scary thing is though, with Shelley Muscovich, 2007, nobody's done anything to try to locate her. The authorities, nobody. It's like this guy is untouchable, and they feel they can do whatever they want, and they're free of any investigation.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm familiar with the hit on the Scientologists, and you know, as far as I can tell, a lot of it is spot on. But that said, you can understand if you were the wife of the guy who became the head of Scientology and you had a falling out, you might want to just kind of lay low, you know? I mean, are you sure that she's like literally missing, or is she just like gone super low profile?
She's been missing. I mean,
like police files.
What's her name? Yeah, what's her name? Who's doing the anti-Scientology shows? I can't remember her name right now. Leah Remini.
Okay, I haven't seen the show, so I don't know what you're talking about. But
yeah, she's been trying to do whatever she can to try to locate her, and nobody knows anything. They won't give out any information. There's been a lot of people that have been questioning where she is for
Interesting.
11 years.
Well, you know, Rick, thank you for that. I can't verify any of that, so don't take it to the bank until you've researched it. But assuming that you're telling me the truth, Rick, that's fascinating. We'll see what it has to do with Melania, you know. But anyhow, we'll be back. Bob Ney is going to be with us in just a minute with our news report for the day, so stick around. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, a new book by Ellen Ratner. On the line with us, the author of Sideswiped, former Congressman Bob Ney. Bob, welcome back.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Great. So what do you see as the top stories going on in the world today?
Well, we have a strange news day in several ways. Now, the tariffs aren't strange. President Trump has imposed tariffs on the European Union. And so now there is basically what we would call an official trade war, and that Canada was a bit mild on what it would do, and it wasn't direct and didn't say anything. It just said it would take appropriate action. Mexico and the European Union were a little bit more bold in their statements that there would be retaliation. Now, interestingly enough, the European Union is considering putting a tariff on Kentucky bourbon.
Right. To hit Mitch McConnell, yeah.
Right, is from a senator from Kentucky and the leader of the Senate. And then also Harley-Davidson, motorcycles. And then, of course, you've got Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House. So that was just kind of interesting in itself.
You know, the bourbon one might actually backfire because you'll recall, you're old enough to remember when Coors beer was only available in the Colorado area. Right. And I grew up in Michigan, and we would pay a fortune for Coors, because it wasn't available. And so, people who are discretionary drinkers and are brand drinkers tend to have a little cash and not be so concerned with price. And in fact, if price goes up, that's a perception of increased value. So my guess is that if the price of bourbon goes up 15, 20% in Europe, the sales might go up 25 or 30%. The other things, maybe not so much, but, who knows?
Oh, you're right.
By the way,
great thinking.
A quick question. I've been talking this morning about Martha Mitchell. You are also, like me, I believe, old enough to remember Martha Mitchell.
Yes.
And how she got beat up by Steve King, this former FBI agent, and according to several reporters, she was black and blue, and then they hustled her off to a shrink in California and shot her up with drugs.
In a center, a rehab center.
Right, all this kind of stuff, just because she wanted to talk to reporters about what she knew about what was going on with the committee re-elected president. Does anybody have any idea where Melania Trump has been for the last 21 days?
No, I haven't heard a word. The only thing I heard, a friend of mine in D.C. had said he thought it was unusual for now he's not a doctor, but he had a friend, that's a doctor. He thought it was a bit, in itself, a little bit unusual stay for, the procedure she had. He was saying that at the time.
Right.
But it's been very, very quiet. I haven't heard anything, but it's quiet.
So Steve King, the guy who beat up and had the doctor drug Martha Mitchell, was just made ambassador to the Czech Republic by Donald Trump. Was he in the White House 3 weeks ago by any chance?
Oh, my goodness. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's 76 years old. He's now our ambassador to Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic.
That one I didn't know.
Yeah, very interesting, huh?
Now I've got some more news for this afternoon you've given me, so thank you.
I'm just wondering, if Steve King had been in the White House 3 weeks ago and Melania's been gone for 3 weeks,
she's been gone. Yeah,
I'd be scratching my head. Anyhow, what else is going on in the world, Bob?
Doing double duty.
Yeah.
Actually, so the tariffs are going on now. There's other news stories here, but I must say this is becoming absolutely fascinating on the pardons.
Okay.
Scooter Libby, you can see where Dick Cheney was picking up the phone, right?
Right.
To keep Scooter quiet forever. But I must say, Dinesh D'Souza, and of course he was the filmmaker, conservative, that lied to the Federal Elections Commission. He put campaign contributions in the name of others, and Trump is pardoning him. And then also he's announced Martha Stewart, where he would pardon her. And then the potential commutation of Rod Blagojevich's sentence. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that Rod Blagojevich got an unusually harsh sentence, due to the fact that the former Speaker of the House tried to exchange money for my seat to get me out of it, offering me a job. So, one tries to sell a seat or influence, and then one tries to buy a seat, which is what Boehner did with me, and then, of course, he wasn't penalized. So I think in itself, Blagojevich got a fairly harsh sentence, but it's kind of surprising. The question is, why Blagojevich?
Is he still in jail, Blagojevich?
Yeah, he got.
So Blagojevich is a Democrat. Martha Stewart was a Democrat. Maybe he's just trying to look balanced, or maybe he's trying to highlight the fact that some Democrats commit crimes too.
No, I'm thinking along the lines that he's showing that he is willing. Look, Blagojevich is a Democrat. And he was, involved in, quote, selling the Obama seat, right?
So what Trump is signaling is that he's fine with political corruption.
And I think it's potentially where he is signaling that if you get in trouble and you're high profile, he's got the guts to pardon you.
Right.
Which could tell, obviously, people that are associated with him that he, in fact, would maybe pardon them.
Right. This is a dog whistle. In fact, it's a dog bullhorn to the whole bunch of them, from Cohen to Manafort to et cetera. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I think that's very, very possible. And then North Korea, of course, the ex-spy of North Korea met with our ex-spy, Pompeo, our ex-spy chief in New York. It was a kind of surreal scene, Tom, having dinner, an hour and a half, all smiles. I think that means, of course, that the conference is still going to be on.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at the California seats. Look, the House is up for grabs. We all know that. And there were 3 seats out there. 2 of them are open. Darrell Issa and then also Ed Royce have, decided not to run again. Dana Rohrabacher is in extreme controversy. So those are the 3 targeted seats. Now, for the Democratic side, it's going to be a little bit difficult. I mean, time will tell here soon, but in the sense that the fact remains that in their system, the 2 highest vote takers run. So you could actually have, 2 Democratic choices in the fall. But a lot of Democratic candidates got into that, Tom, in some cases too many. That may give a little bit of an edge to at least for a Republican to be there in the fall for the contest. But that's a big deal for the control of the House, a big deal.
Yeah.
And then the last is the move afoot to try to get senators elected to hopefully overturn Roe versus Wade with a new appointee to the Supreme Court.
Wow.
That's out there.
The holy grail of the Catholics and the fundies.
Right.
Amazing. Bob Ney, author of Sideswipe. Bob, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be back.
Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair chair, office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Not only are we pleased to have Superbeets as an underwriter for our program, but it's a great product that I drink every day. Check it out at ThomsBeets, THOMSBEETS.com, or give them a call at 800-568-9889. Superbeets. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Gar Alperovitz's book, What Then Must We Do? Gar is an economist, by the way, and this is from the introduction. I've borrowed my title, What Then Must We Do, from Tolstoy and the profoundly disturbing 1886 book that he wrote once he began to dig below the surface of what was happening in late 19th century Russia, a time when the system was in decay, the aristocracy enjoyed extraordinary luxury, and the peasants endured lives of hunger and pain. As a person of privilege, he began to understand something deeper about his time in history. Tolstoy wrote, I sit on a man's back, choking him and making him carry me, and yet assure myself and others that I am very sorry for him and wish to ease his lot by all means possible, except by getting off his back. Most of us do not literally sit on men's backs, making them carry us. We do, however, often uneasily look the other way, satisfying ourselves with modest changes that reassure us that all is well, while millions are in despair. We've done the best we can do, we might say, given the realities. Still, many sense, as did Tolstoy, that to actually do something serious would require us to confront much deeper problems than we are commonly willing to do. What then must we do is not shouted in the streets, but it is a question that more and more Americans, young and old, liberal, radical, and conservative, are quietly beginning to ask themselves in much more penetrating ways. So let us begin. My starting point is the obvious fact that despite its great wealth, the United States faces today enormous difficulties, with no easily discernible political answers that even begin to offer strategic handholds on a truly democratic future. Elections occur and major fiscal debates ensue, but many of the most pressing problems facing ordinary citizens are only marginally affected, and in many cases in ways that increase burdens, not reduce them. The issue is not simply that our situation is worrisome, however. It is that there are growing reasons to believe that we in fact face systemic problems, not simply political ones. Systemic problems in the fundamental, not the superficial sense. In the pages ahead, I will suggest that our nation's truly critical problems are built into the very structure of the economic and political system. They are not something passing in the night that will go away even when we elect forward-looking thinkers and actively pressure them to move in a different direction. I won't load you down with statistics at this point. A couple of obvious reminders, however. Not only has the economy been stagnating for a long time, but for the average person and the average family, things have been bad for a very long time. Real wages for 80% of Americans' workers, for example, have not gone up more than a trivial amount for the last 3 decades. At the same time, income for the top 1% has jumped from nearly 10% of all income to roughly 20% of all income. Put another way, virtually all of the gains of the entire economic system have gone to the tiny, tiny group at the top for at least 3 decades. Worth pausing to think about that one. What's going on when virtually all the gains for the entire economic system go to the top? I'm not interested here in criticizing those at the top. The question is, we can do that later, the question is, what is going on with the system when this kind of thing happens and continues to happen in an ongoing way, year after year, decade after decade? Another reminder, almost 50 million Americans live in officially defined poverty. The rate is higher, not lower, than in the late 1960s, another disturbing trend marker. Moreover, if we use the measuring standard common throughout the advanced world, which considers the poverty level to be half the median income level, the number would be just under 70 million, and the rate would be almost 23% of all Americans living in poverty. That is to say nothing of steady increases in global warming and an unemployment rate that, if properly measured, is stuck in the range of roughly 15%. At the most superficial level, Washington, as the saying goes, is broken. Give or take an occasional gain in selected areas, the political system is simply incapable of dealing with the deeper challenges. Its focus on deficits is not, it focuses on deficits, not answers. Long trends that don't change are a clear signal that it's not simply the modern period of partisan bickering and congressional stalemate that is causing the problems. The trends are moving steadily downward. We're moving steadily downward long before the Tea Party and the recent partisan foolishness, long before the Citizens United Supreme Court decision allowed corporations to put big money directly into politics, and long before many events that have heralded as tipping points one kind or another. Nor are people stupid. More and more have a sense that something different is going on, both with the economy and more fundamentally with democracy itself. A few more bits of information just as reminders again of something that we're all beginning to see. A mid-2011 poll found that roughly 80% of Americans believe their congressional representatives to be, quote, more interested in serving the needs of special interest groups than the people they represent, end quote. Another poll found that almost 4 out of 5 believe a few rich people in corporations have far too much power. And only 37% of Americans, much more than a third of the population, have confidence in the most solemn and august of American institutions, the Supreme Court. I'm going to dig much, much deeper into all of this, of course, but for now, let's leave it at this. When critical, long trends do not improve, when they steadily get worse year in and year out, it is clear that we face deeply rooted systemic problems, not simply political problems in the usual sense of the term. Moreover, as these polls suggest, people increasingly understand that something is really wrong. The question is, how do we deal with a systemic crisis, something built into the way the political economy works, rather than just a simple political or economic crisis? Garo Parvitz, what then must we do?
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Advertise. Begin.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, the plot thickens. Donald Trump is talking now about pardoning both Martha Stewart and Rod Blagojevich. And you go, wait a minute. Martha Stewart in 2016 came right out and said she was going to vote for Hillary Clinton. She's been a lifelong Democrat. And Rod Blagojevich was the Democratic governor of Illinois. I think he's sitting in a jail cell right now. He got a 14-year sentence. And which Donald Trump referred to this morning as an 18-year sentence. He was convicted of 18 felonies, got a 14-year sentence. But in any case, it's just numbers. So, but why Blago and Martha? Well, it turns out that there's actually some logic to what Trump is doing. He is clearly tying his use for the pardon power to his political fortunes and as a shout out to people who may have dirt on him or may be being pressured by prosecutors to do something, you know, to tell them what's going on, to spill the beans. And so the thing with Blagojevich is he just published an op-ed, an opinion piece. This is from Public Citizen. They just tweeted this. Trump is now considering commuting the sentence of former Apprentice star Rod Blagojevich. So he knows Trump. He worked with Trump, worked for Trump, arguably, who just published an op-ed echoing the president's talking points on the Mueller investigation. The message is clear. Stay loyal to Trump and you will be rewarded. So Blagojevich publishes a, hey, you know, Trump's not such a bad guy piece, and Mueller's terrible, and Trump says, hey, you know, maybe I'll let him out of jail. Martha Stewart, it's a slightly different story. With Martha Stewart, Rudy Giuliani is now saying that Donald Trump should not sit down for an interview with the FBI, ever, because of what happened to Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart, you will recall, was originally investigated for insider trading. The theory, the belief was that a friend of hers, good friend of hers, who owned a small pharmaceutical company, which was publicly traded,
that he told her that they had this blockbuster new drug coming out, and therefore she bought more stock in his company than she would have otherwise bought, and she made a profit. Okay, that was the allegation. And when the FBI interrogated her, they said, did you have this conversation with this guy? This is my recollection of the story. Actually, this is as I understand this case. Okay, I'm not one of the lawyers involved, but basically, she lied to the FBI, and she wasn't prosecuted for insider trading. She was prosecuted for lying to the FBI, which, by the way, is what nailed Bill Clinton. Remember? Perjury. And it's what Rudy Giuliani is afraid will happen if Donald Trump talks to anybody who, he may lie to, because he just lies. I mean, he's lied 3,000 times in the first year and a half of his presidency. He just lies. He goes to Tennessee the day before yesterday, gives a speech, lies 9 major lies about big things. So Martha Stewart gets busted for lying, and he's like, I'll pardon her. And Blagojevich is sucking up to him and, oh, yeah, I'll pardon him. Strange stuff going on. Very strange stuff going on. Where does all this go? What does all this mean? And how is it that these guys are constantly on TV? Howard in New York City. Hey, Howard, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Tom. The Republicans, Trump and Giuliani, seem to be able to get on TV anytime, any station. The Democrats have nobody. They have Ellison and Perez, who can't get on TV to save their lives. But I have 3 suggestions I wanted you to think about, people that could represent the Dems the way, Mumbles and Spanky represent the Republicans. One would be Michael Avenatti, if he, for example, declared for the Senate. He gets all the publicity he wants, and he seems to me to be a progressive. The second I would recommend would be Joseph Kennedy, and bring back the whole Camelot shtick. And the third one would be Warren Buffett, along with Ralph Nader, who says the only guy that can beat a bad billionaire is a good billionaire. I'm worrying about the November elections, unless we get some advertising and some good spokespersons. What do you think?
I don't think anybody's going to save us, Howard, and I think salvationist thinking is a dangerous thing. Warren Buffett may be a Democrat and a reasonable guy, but he's no progressive. He's not going to save the Republic, and he's not going to certainly take on his right-wing crank billionaire colleagues. Instead, he's giving away half his money and to charities, which is a fine thing, but he's not that interested in politics. And I don't see any of these things happening. What I think we need to do is we need to just buckle down and get involved. We need we need to be showing up at the Democratic Party. We need to be getting inside the party, become precinct committee people, and we need to make sure that not only are we registered to vote, but everybody we know is registered to vote, and get ready for this next election, because it's going to be a big one. Howard, thanks for the call. Virginia in Oceanside, California. Hey, Virginia, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment in regards to the pardons. A dictator doesn't care whether you're Republican or Democrat.
Good point.
This is a scary part. Not scary, because I'm not scared of it. But I'm just saying a dictatorship doesn't care. It washes the Democrat and the Republican, parties. It's who he wants to pardon and when he wants to pardon. And I just want to say that. And I wish somebody would write a book for dummies, 101, how to fight for our democracy, or give us something to read. Tell us what to do, like you just said right now. Get out and vote. Get to the meeting. Somebody needs to tell us. A lot of us are working. My friends aren't voting. I can't get them to vote. Give us something to read. In our time when we get off of work, their lives are busy. I just wanted to make a comment.
Yep. You did, and it's a good one, and it's a real problem, Virginia. I mean, we had, only about a third of young people voting in the last couple of elections. Although I have a feeling it's going to be a much, much higher participation in this election. But the unfortunate reality is that most people who vote are wealthy white people. And, of course, they went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in the last election. Or not overwhelmingly, but they went overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton, but not in the states that mattered. Anyhow, Virginia, thank you for the call. Well said. Charles in Opelika, Florida. Hey, Charles, what's up?
How you doing, Tom?
Good. What's on your mind?
Okay, great. I wanted to call and say, first of all, China. I think we're going to find out at the end of Mueller's investigation that China was also part of the land and trying to influence the 2016 presidential campaign to get Donald Trump reelected. And now I got to jump on something else that's killing me. And I just need you to understand that I'm frustrated with this Democratic leadership from the House and from the Senate, because in 2009, before we had the Obamacare pass, the ACA, Republicans, they made sure that they held town hall meetings. They lied. They cheated, whatever, but they got those people all riled up. But they got them to understand that they did not want anything from the Obamacare or anything else. And we don't have to lie.
I'm sorry, say it again, Charles. Your phone just broke up.
I'm sorry, we don't have to lie. As far as telling the American people what's going on with this Mueller investigation, how the heck did Pompeo become Secretary of State? How did this lady become the head of the CIA? Just too much stuff passed by, and we can't say there's going to be a blue wave. Because if there was a blue wave, there's no one out here leading the charge, and it's to me.
Yeah, we don't. Charles, leaders are a good thing, and they're fine, but we don't actually have to have them. It's you and me, Charles. Thanks a lot for the call.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We are the ones we have been waiting for. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Oh, let's see here. Charles in Webb City, Missouri. Hey, Charles, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Yeah, Tom, I just been watching this Trump fiasco ever since he was so-called elected. And according to what I've seen on the news media, he got nailed back in New York someplace at Trump University, where he defrauded a bunch of people, and he evidently allocated to agreeing that he screwed up, and rather than go to court, he paid a $17 million fine.
$25 million.
Still doesn't. Pardon?
$25 million. And that was that was during the election, by the way.
That's right. And when he did that, he had to allocate that he was guilty, or he had to go to court. And to me, that means that he paid his way off from being a felon.
Right.
Either that, or he went to the presidency under false pretenses.
Or like with Rick Scott with his company down in Florida that was convicted of the largest Medicare fraud in the history of the United States. And Rick Scott, when he testified, he kept saying, "I don't remember. I'm sorry. My memory is faulty." Again, in both cases, I think it was the corporation that was convicted of the felonies, not the guy running the corporation.
Well, yeah, I see how you're saying that too. But to my way of thinking, if a guy owns a corporation, of course the law doesn't say that, but if he did that, he had to allocate that was a felony, and he went to the people that elected him elected a felon to the presidency.
It seems that way. I completely agree with your analysis, Charles, but it's not going to be any kind of magic bullet. Charles, thanks for the call. Mark in Valley, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's up? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
I got a scenario a quick scenario I want to run by and see what your opinion is on it.
Go for it.
Mueller comes out with some really good evidence, issues a subpoena to have Trump come testify. He refuses. New York sends their U.S. Marshals to come usher him to the subpoena. What's the Secret Service going to do?
They will not allow the U.S. Marshals in, and I would guess, and I think that at that point it goes to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, at that point we have a major constitutional crisis.
That's correct. That's correct, and that's what it would be. That's what it would take to provoke it, and but frankly, I doubt that it would play out in quite that course of fashion. I doubt that Mueller or anybody in the Justice Department would issue an arrest warrant essentially for Donald Trump. And frankly, since they all work for him, technically, he may be even able to prevent them from doing so, this is the thing that, you know, the professional law enforcement officers, people inside the FBI and the Department of Justice are genuinely flipped out about, is that historically those agencies were independent from the White House, particularly since the 70s, since the Nixon abuses. And while there are not firewalls built in legislatively, which is how it should have been done, they've been built in as a matter of practice and policy. Those practices and policies are now being taken down by Donald Trump and the Trumpistas there in the White House. And that's got a lot of people really concerned that those institutions, you know, if they ever get turned into Praetorian Guards, right now it's a contentious relationship. But if it ever becomes a suck-up relationship, if they become the Praetorian Guard, then you've got a serious problem. Mark, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Dominic in Schaumburg, Illinois. It says here you disagree with me. What's up, Dominic?
Hi, Tom. I love your show. Thanks for talking to me. You repeatedly stated that one of the things that you think is wrong with our government right now is the Senate and the 2 votes for every state.
Well, it's one of the structural problems that we have, that senators representing about, I think it's 17, maybe it's 23% of America, now control, you know, I'd have to go back and find the article, but well, you know, the senators representing a very small part of America basically control the United States Senate.
Well, I think it was designed that way for a reason. If you read Thomas Jefferson, you know the reason. I think the real problem is actually in the House. Okay, because in the Apportionment Act of 1911, they capped the size of the House at 435. And then they just allocate how many representatives each state gets.
Right.
But in the last election, what that means is that in the Electoral College, the least populous state, Wyoming, got 1 vote for every 195,000 people, where in California, our most populous state, they got 1 vote for every 713,000 people. That's the disproportion right there, is the fact that our least—
Wait a minute, hang on just a second here, Dominic. Oklahoma has a population of about 3 million, if I'm recalling correctly. And they have 2 senators and one member of Congress, right? Or 2?
Wyoming.
Wyoming, yeah. Wyoming has a Wyoming has a population that's around 2 million, isn't it?
No, it's not even that.
Not even that. Okay.
It's about 500,000.
So it's less than 1 million people. I thought it was a little larger than Vermont. Vermont is 600,000, but whatever. Let's say it's 1 million people just for purposes of discussion. They have 1 member of Congress and 2 senators. That's 3 electoral votes right there.
Correct.
And that's it, right, for the state?
Well, that's it for that state. Okay.
Okay, so you take those 3 electoral votes and you divide that into the 1 million people, and so that's 1 vote for every 300,000 people, roughly. In California,
and the actual number is 1 vote for every 195,000 people.
Okay, so the population's less, or whatever, but yeah.
Right. While California has 55 electoral votes.
Right.
Okay, for their population, which is almost 4 million.
Right, but this is once again it's a combination of that capping process that you talked about. If the population of Wyoming is less than 400,000, I don't think it is, and the fact that the 2 senators add to it. I mean, those 2 senators are 2/3 of the electoral votes in Wyoming. So we're back to the Senate. And yeah, if you read the founders, actually the one to read is the debates at the Constitutional Convention, Madison's notes in 1787 or 1786, and what they concluded was that Rhode Island was saying, and Delaware were saying, if we don't each get 2 senators, we're not going to join the Union. I mean, that's what it was about. And then you had the slave states in the South. They were like, yeah, we'll support Rhode Island and Delaware because, they actually had very small white populations. Some of those states, Georgia in particular, at the time.
Right. Well, the whole thing was a balance between the less populated states and the higher populated states.
Right, in terms of white men, yes.
Well, the higher populated states didn't want to be dictated to by the lesser populated states, and the lesser populated states didn't want to be dominated by the higher populated states.
Correct.
So they created the two houses, one where every state has an equal say, and one where the say is proportionate to the population.
Right. So are you offering a solution to this, Dominic?
Well, the only real solution is to go back to is it Section 1, Article 2, or is it? I can never get the numbers straight. That said, we should have 1 representative for every 30,000 people. That would give California actually 1,300 representatives, and Wyoming would get 20, and therefore that would make the House proportionate to the population.
Yeah, I could see cutting the threshold, the 400 and change thousand and change threshold, down to something much lower than that. But I'm not, but another easy solution. I mean, we're not going to do away with the constitutional mandate that there be 2 senators from each state. But another easy solution would be to have Puerto Rico join the United States. They get 2 senators. Have Washington, D.C. become a state. They get 2 senators. And break California into 3 states. Those 3 things. Well, just bringing in Puerto Rico and D.C., I guarantee you, if the Republicans were in charge of things, and Puerto Rico and D.C.
The problem there is they won't change the number of representatives. The representatives are going to be capped at 430.
I get it, and you're right on that. I get it, but also you've got a kind of a physical limit to how many people can functionally be in the House of Representatives. Interesting stuff, Dominic. Thanks a lot for the call. You're absolutely right.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Seize the Time, the story of the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton by Bobby Seale. This is from page 85, a subchapter titled Huey Backs the Pigs Down. And there are a few words in here that I'll be filling in, as it were. They're walking. He says, one day as we were walking out of the office, I guess we'd been there about a month or so, a pig passed by. He saw us coming out of the office with shotguns and pistols on our sides. About 6 or 7 of us came out of the office there in the daytime, and we looked at the pig as he passed by, and he jumped on his radio because he saw us coming out of the office with these pieces and stuff. We had just finished field stripping weapons, learning about 00 buckshot, learning about the 9mm and the .45, and having a political education session. We had a .45 and a .357 Magnum in the group and a couple of M1s. We had 3 or 4 shotguns by then. We bought up guns like a son of a bitch then. The pig went down 2 blocks and turned around, came back up the other side of the street. They were building rapid transit, BART, right down from Grove Street there, and we went up the other side of the boulevard and came back. We readily assessed that the pigs were ready to see what the F was happening, that this pig had radioed in, and he was running it down, how he had, quote, seen some N-words come out of a place here with some guns and blop, blop, de bloop, etc., come out of this office with guns and stuff. He was radioing into other pigs to help get him. Huey had his father's car that day, and he goes through that whole thing. So anyhow, the police pull him over, and Huey got in the car, and the pig came up to the window. You have any driver's license? So Huey rolled the window down. That wasn't more than a 3 or 4 inch crack in the window. Huey handed his license out the window. Is this your true name, the pig said? And Huey said, yes, that's my true name, Huey P. Newton. Is this your true address, 841 47th Street? And Huey said, yep, that's my true address, 841 47th Street. And what are you doing with the guns? And Huey said, what are you doing with your gun? This particular pig decided he wasn't going to argue, so he went back and got his little writing pad there where they fill out S-word. Your true name is Huey P. Newton? Huey said, that's right. The pig wrote it down. Your true address is 841 47th Street? Huey said, that's right. The pig then looked at his license. What's your phone number? And Huey said, 5, and stopped and wouldn't say anything else. And the pig said, 5 what? And this is when all the S-word between the pig and the party and the pigs began. Huey said, the 5th Amendment. You ever heard of it? Don't you know about the constitutional right of a person not to testify against himself? 5, I don't have to give you anything but my identification, name, and address, so therefore I don't even want to talk to you. You can leave my car and leave me alone. I don't even want to hear you. What do you mean, the pig said. And Huey said, just what I said. The constitutional right of any man is that he doesn't have to testify against himself. And Huey had a big M1 sitting to his right with his hand on it. I had this 9mm sitting beside me, and Huey had this M1 at his side. Huey was driving. 4 other brothers were in the back seat. One of them was Bobby Hutton. They were being quiet because Huey told them to be quiet, and the pig is going crazy. He's by himself, and Huey's got all these black N-words in the car going for the MFer. Meanwhile, while the pig is trying to get bad, 3 cars drove up behind us and 1 in the front. Some more were in the driveway. Blop, 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 de blue. Then another car came in front of us. A pig jumped out of the car, walked up to our car, and said through the crack in the window with a hoggish voice trying to sound intimidating, what's going on here? And Huey said, the same basic procedures that are supposed to go on. Huey rolled the window down another 5 or 6 inches. The pigs were looking at the guns in the car. Can I see that pistol there? One of the pigs said. No, you can't see it, Huey told him. I was beginning to get skeptical about what was happening because he pointed to my 9mm pistol. Huey was on probation, and if they thought that this was Huey's pistol, I didn't know this law stuff the way Huey knew it, so I moved the pistol over beside me real close. It had been lying in the middle of the seat. I said, no, you can't see it. Huey said, no, you can't see the pistol, nor this, pointing to his rifle. And you don't want to look, and I don't want you to look at it. You don't have to look at it. Is that your pistol? He asked Huey. And I said, no, it's not his pistol, it's my pistol. I said that because I was thinking the man's going to jump on Huey because he already told me about the probation law. If he gets caught with a pistol, he's burned. But if he gets caught with a rifle, the man can't mess with him because his probation officer told him he can carry a rifle or shotgun and he couldn't stop him. The pig said, can I see it or not? So Huey said to me, I'll talk. And then he said to the pig, no, you can't see the pistol. Get away from the car. We don't want you around the car, and that's all there is to it. Well, I can ask him if I can see his pistol or not, the pig says. So I says, well, you can't see my pistol. The MFers tried to get indignant. They were blabbing and oinking to each other about who in the hell we thought we were, and Constitution my ass, they're just turning it around. Then the pig said to Huey, who the hell do you think you are? Look, damn it, Huey said. He opened the car door. This is where Huey got mad. I mean, you have to imagine this N-word. He got mad because these dogs were going to carry on, and they were bracing up like they were bad. Huey didn't go for this at all. Huey got very mad. He opened up the door saying, who the hell do you think you are? In the first place, this man, pointing at the pig, came up here and asked me for my license like he was citing me for a ticket or observation of some kind. This police officer is supposed to be carrying out his duty, and here you come talking about our guns? Huey put his hand around his M1 rifle and continued, we have a constitutional right to carry the guns, and anyway, I don't want to hear it. The pigs backed up a couple of steps, and Huey was coming out of the car. Huey had his hand back in the car getting his M1, and you know, if you've ever seen Huey, he gets growly but articulate. He came out of the car with his M1. Huey knows this law so well that he wouldn't have had the one M1 loaded inside the car. So he came out of the car, he dropped around into the chamber right away. Clack, clop. Who do you think you all are anyway? Huey said to the pigs. And the pigs were all on the sidewalk harassing all the brothers and sisters who gathered around. You move on down the street, said the pig. Huey started interrupting. You don't have to move down the street. Don't go anywhere. These pigs can't keep you from observing. You have a right to observe an officer carrying out his duty. And these pigs, they listen to all this S-word, and it goes on from there. It's a great story. Seize the Time by Bobby Seale. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Interesting how Tamara Beinlich over on Twitter says, not one paparazzi got a picture of Melania Trump going to or from Walter Reed or going to Trump Tower. Any First Lady of the U.S. leaving Walter Reed would be filmed. And Trump Tower is surrounded by media. I think she's recovering from being beaten up. Yeah, who knows? I mean, you know, her husband has bragged about being able to do whatever he wants to women. God only knows. Anyway, James in Roanoke, Virginia. Hey, James, what's on your mind? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Tom, I got a question. If Trump, if he dies in office, he gets a state funeral and all the pomp and circumstance. If he gets kicked out of office, impeached, and removed in disgrace, is he still entitled to a state funeral? Because I'm ex-military. And it just burns me up to think that that draft-dodging bastard is going to get a state funeral.
Well, President Bone Spurs, yeah. I believe that I don't recall Richard Nixon getting a state funeral. I think he had a fairly low-profile funeral. And I know if you're dishonorably discharged from the military, you're not eligible, certainly for burial at Arlington and those kind of things. So probably, James, if he gets bounced out, he would not be eligible. But I don't know that for a fact. But it seems to be that, based on what we saw with the Nixon thing. James, thanks for the call. And JC in San Francisco. Hey, JC, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I came up with a quick little song when I was watching Nixon's funeral procession, and it was broadcast live, unfettered. And my little song was, ding dong, the dick is dead, the dick is dead, the dick. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, you said Praetorian guards, I think. And when I was living and studying in Denmark back in the 70s, the Danish television company put on Masterpiece Theater's I, Claudius series. And it was a 13-parter. And during the corruption of the Roman Empire, that's when the bad guys started bringing in Praetorian guards from Saxony, aka Germans, and they were the most obedient and the biggest, strongest, whatever, head choppers. It was just a fantastic series, and it more and more keeps coming up in my mind this past year and a half of watching this swamp be refilled with Republicans. And I've never forgotten the final segment where Claudius is dying. He's not dying, but he's drunk. Rome is falling. It's burning around him, and he's lying on his repose, and he repeats this one phrase. Remember, he says, let all the evil that lurks in the mud hatch out. And he repeats that line several times. And I can't help but think that's what we're taking place right now. And I think the Praetorian Guards are already here. They're just trying to fill up all the places, the empty spots available. And that what you said shortly ago, half hour ago, is I think it's here. It just hasn't been finalized. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that our thoughts on this are intersecting. You tell me, JC. But when I look back at Hurricane Katrina, and George W. Bush hired Blackwater to guard, basically to keep black people in the disaster zone and keep them from getting out of the disaster zone into white areas. I mean, let's just tell the truth. That's really what it was all about. You know, and here we had, you know, a foreign mercenary company patrolling an American city. That just blew my mind. And then you have Trump meeting in the Seychelles and in Trump Tower with Eric Prince, you know, who's now changed the name of his company a couple of times with all the crimes that his people have committed, and apparently he has too. It's totally strange. You know, is that what you're talking about, JC?
Yeah, and I do have one thing to add about adding Puerto Rico and D.C. to the two senators thing, that suggesting that we should put. My suggestion would be to put Alabama and Mississippi on U.S. protectorate status, so we don't have to change the format of the flag. We just, you know, put 2 on the injured reserve list and bring in 2 for starters. So to speak.
Yeah. Good luck with that. And you know, we've got a lot of good progressives living in those 2 states too. They may not control the politics yet, but I think it's coming. I think it's going to happen. Anyhow, thanks a lot for the call, JC. It's good talking with you. Ruth in Northbrook, Illinois. Hey, Ruth, what's on your mind?
Hi. Okay, so my big question has been for this past 18 months or 24 months, whatever, is that I'm just wondering how it is that we got to this point where the Republicans are so, I mean, I kind of want to use the word evil, to, you know, have support like from the Mercers and Koch brothers and whatever other forces are out there to make it so negative. I don't even think they're only after profit. I feel like they're on some sort of deep, destructive, almost global hate agenda that is really taking us down. And I just want to understand what their intention is and what their effect on the Congress is, and actually all our state governments and maybe even more than that. I just want to understand that
back in 1951, a guy by the name of Russell Kirk wrote a book called The Conservative Mind, which was hailed by people like William F. Buckley and Barry Goldwater. Reading it in the 1950s was a turning point for these guys. It awakened them to what being a conservative meant. And one of the things that Russell Kirk talked about in that book, in The Conservative Mind, and you can find this, by the way, is a recap of a chapter in my book, Screwed, okay? Just if anybody wants the references and the footnotes and everything, and it's in libraries, you know, all over the country. So one of the things that Russell Kirk said was that this growing middle class, see, 1951 was just, you know, 5 years after the end of World War II. And the American middle class was really starting to grow substantially as people were getting back to work, and the GI Bill was working. People were buying houses. You know, they were going to college, things like that. And Kirk warned Republicans and conservatives. He said, if this middle class reaches a level of wealth and comfort where they no longer have to worry about their day-to-day survival, they will begin going up Maslow's pyramid, his hierarchy of human needs. They will start looking for, you know, self-fulfillment. They will start looking for enlightenment. They will start looking for the higher needs, and they will no longer be subservient to and dependent upon their employers and their state, frankly, and the government. And to that point, this is a really dangerous thing, this growing middle class, because you are going to see a revolution, particularly of young people, and it's going to lead to chaos, and that chaos could look something like the Russian Revolution of 1917 or whatever year it was, and, exactly. You know, with the ruling class being overthrown. And, you know, most people read that and thought, you know, in the 50s and even in the early 60s and thought, Russell Kirk is a crank, you know. I mean, his book is fascinating. It starts out, you know, with, well, I don't need to go through his whole book, but anyhow. But when the mid-60s happened, by 1965, 66, when young people started, you know, taking acid and growing out their hair and saying, you know, no, I'm not going to go off to Vietnam and fight in your stupid wars, and we demand civil rights, and young white people were participating in the civil rights movement. In fact, SDS was not started as an anti-war movement. It was started as social justice, particularly for people of color. You know, the Port Huron Statement and all that kind of stuff. And so when that happened, all that stuff happened, conservatives, Russell Kirk conservatives, Barry Goldwater conservatives said, see, I told you so. It's happening right now. This is the beginning of the end of the American Republic. This is the end of this experiment because the middle class got too fat and happy, and now they are going to take down the whole thing. And so we've got to dial back this middle class. And the guy that came into power to do that was Ronald Reagan. And the first thing he did was destroy unions. In fact, his first action was destroying PATCO, the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, the air traffic union, after PATCO had endorsed him because he had made an explicit deal with them, a public deal with them, that if they supported him, he would support them in their efforts to modernize the air traffic control system. And instead, he used them as patsies, he destroyed them, and he kicked off his taking down of the American labor movement that way. And what Reagan did is he dropped the top tax rate from 74% down to 25%. Before Reagan came into office, I'm not sure exactly which year it was, but I do know in the last year of the Eisenhower administration, fully 1/3 of all the income into the United States federal government came from corporate income taxes. Right now, it's 11%. So, it used to be corporations paid about 1/3 of the cost of running our country. Now it's around, 1/10 of the cost of running our country. We're paying the rest of it. It used to be billionaires paid 74% in their income taxes if they took over $3 million a year in income. Now they've got it down to 21%, with the new GOP tax scam. So systematically, what the Republicans and conservatives have been doing for the last 40 years is deconstructing the middle class so it will never again rise up and have the power to challenge the wise elders of the Republican Party and the business class. And at the same time, hyper-empowering the business class and the billionaires so that they will never have to worry about a challenge to their power. So, and putting people on the courts, and this started with Nixon putting Lewis Powell on the court in 1972. Lewis Powell then in 76 wrote the decision in Buckley versus Vallejo, which for the very first time in the history of the United States, from 1787 to 1976, we said putting money into political campaigns is a political act. It can be regulated. And in 1976, Lewis Powell in the Supreme Court, with the recommendation of Richard Nixon, Nixon by that time was out, but Jerry Ford anyway, said that when billionaires or corporations spend money on politicians, whether it's to buy that politician by making campaign donations or whether it's buying ads on behalf of the politician, that's First Amendment protected free speech. It's not spending money, it's free speech. And therefore, you cannot stop that and you cannot regulate it. And that led to Citizens United, which has cemented the power of these guys. But that's my 3-minute history of the last 60 years, Ruth. Does it make sense?
Yes, but what I'm really disturbed about is we don't ever hear the underlying motive for all of this in any of the cable news, in any of the news articles that come to Trump this, Trump that. And I want to know what the motive is because I feel like we are not acting as
If you go back to the 60s and 70s, Ruth, the motive of people like William Buckley and Barry Goldwater was literally to save the Republic. They thought they were doing the right thing. Now, the bet that Kirk made was wrong, and they were all wrong. And, time has proven them wrong. But I think some of them were actually well-intentioned. Ruth, thank you for the call.
Listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's coming up on 47 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with the Thom Hartmann Program, where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? And we dare to say no. And welcome back. Deb in Norway, South Carolina, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Deb, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I have a question for you.
Okay.
You know how Scott and Trump are able to hide behind their corporations? Why can't individuals become incorporated to hide their assets as well?
It happens all the time.
Really?
Yeah. Most wealthy people have they have multiple corporations, and typically they even have family foundations, which is, their version of a 401k. It's a way of shuffling money off that will be used by future generations, but doesn't get taxed right now. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that rich people can do. I mean, you really have to be, you have to have dozens of millions of dollars to even start considering these things. But people who are worth multiple millions of dollars and, of course, billions of dollars routinely do this kind of stuff, Deb.
But not as individuals. I mean, I couldn't incorporate myself and then hide my assets. My other question is,
you could technically, but it would cost so much that it wouldn't be worth it if you're not really, really rich.
I see. So corporations can't vote either, right?
In theory. They can certainly influence votes.
That was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Deb. Thanks a lot for the call. Nice to hear from you. Lynn in Mobile, Alabama. Hey, Lynn, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Well, thank you for taking my call. I have to tell you that first I was just shocked and disgusted that Trump was invited, I guess, to speak at commencement for the Naval Academy and then the Coast Guard Academy. Okay. And so I was wondering who was responsible for lining him up as the speaker. And then my second point on that is this a way for him to kind of consolidate his base of support, starting to make inroads with the military?
Yes, of course. I mean, that's entirely what it is. And I don't know that the Air Force or the Coast Guard or whoever it was who had him come and speak invited him. It may well be that he reached out to them and said, "Would you like me to come?" And of course, these are executive branch agencies. He is the commander-in-chief. If he wants to show up, he can damn well show up. On the other hand, if I'm the guy who's running, those schools, getting the president as a commencement speaker is a pretty big deal, even if you don't like Trump. I mean, the office itself, there's an awful lot of institutional, within the military and other government agencies as well, there's an awful lot of institutional respect for office, even if you don't respect the person. And so having the president of the United States come to your high school commencement or your college graduation is a pretty big deal, regardless of who he or she is. So
they wouldn't have had a choice, basically.
I don't think so. I don't know the story here, Lynn, and it would be a good one to find out and see if anybody has released it. This kind of story that would probably show up in Military Times, which I don't read, but is published by Gannett, so it should be out there. It's probably on the internet.
Well, I just find it scary as hell.
Yeah. I'm more, I get it, and it concerns me when he uses the military as props. George W. Bush did that a lot, too, particularly on his mission accomplished thing. They're on the USS Abraham Lincoln in 2003. But I'm frankly far more concerned with the way that he's deconstructing the administrative state, what he's doing to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, what he's doing to the State Department, what he's doing to the EPA, what he's doing to the Interior Department. Serious stuff. Lynn, thank you for the call. Good point, though. Good point. Thank you. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Ron in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Tom, to get to, first of all, Blagojevich, if he frees him, that'd be a thumb in the Democratic organization of Illinois, because Blagojevich, his heavy sentence was in part because he disgraced the Democratic organization, and he may have secrets that if he goes into the Trump camp, that he could possibly use against the Democratic Party in Illinois.
Oh, he may well, and he knows Trump. He was a contestant on Celebrity Apprentice.
Yes, and as far as the Praetorian Guard, Betsy DeVos's brother, the founder of Blackwater, has already been mentioned as a replacement for some security elements by the Trump administration.
Yep.
Now, to my point, if I may, the new book that's come out by an aide to President Obama, he has expressed the President Obama's own possible thinking that he may have, what he said, I may have been 10 to 12 years too soon in my position in history. And I'm sorry, but the next leader we choose for the Democratic leadership, we have got to make sure that that leader does not fall into that same category. He must be strong, and he must be willing to fight. Now, as far as President Obama, I'm sorry, I have to say, I think he jumped the line due to the Illinois Democratic Party pushing him forward over Hillary. If Hillary had been allowed to be the president for 2 terms, I think she would have laid the groundwork for President Obama, and the courts would not have been lost to us. That's my opinion, Tom, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, you may well be right, Ron. Who knows? I don't do well with these if-then hypotheticals, but who knows? Jeff in West Monroe, Louisiana. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Tom. I appreciate you taking my call.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Well, I was kind of, I was going to call in about some internet censorship issues, but listening to the show here, I was kind of wondering if I could get your take maybe on what the danger of the alt-right is.
I think broadly speaking, the big danger that's represented by the alt-right is the progressive coarsening of our political dialogue in the United States and the empowerment of the hard right fringe. I mean, the big danger is the merger when the corporate side gets in bed with the hard right, essentially fascistic white nationalist side, as to a large extent they've already done. Then your country is in a serious crisis. And I say that they've already done that in as much as the fact that the media will refuse to call, for example, the shooter in Las Vegas. We now know that the guy was, a conspiracy theorist. He was a Tim McVeigh type. He thought Tim McVeigh was a really cool guy. He was talking about the anniversaries of Waco, all that kind of stuff. He was one of these anti-government alt-right guys, and yet no media will refer to him as a domestic terrorist. And, and yet he killed more people on American soil outside of 9/11 than any other domestic terrorist attack in the history of the United States. And, or at least, more, white people in contemporary time. There were massive slaughters of Native Americans and African Americans, centuries or more ago. But this situation right now. So.
Yes, sir. Well, I was kind of wondering, about the corporations merging with the alt-right. Alt-right people are constantly getting kicked off of Twitter and Facebook and all these other things.
Right.
And as far as the shooter there, he had a non-white girlfriend, so there goes your white nationalist theory. And all these white nationalists want
that doesn't mean anything. I mean, there's one part of the no, Jeff, a large, and thank you for the call. A large part of the white nationalist theology actually involves this whole idea of racial hierarchy. And strangely enough, many of these white nationalist groups will tell you that the white race is not the ultimate superior race. It's some of the East Asian races that are the ultimate superior race. And, which leads to these awful racist stereotypes about people from Japan and China. That, people will just assume if you look Asian, oh, you must be really great at math, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's a racist all of this stuff is like embedded in this whole thing. Rob in Kings Park, New York. Hey, Rob, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Big fan.
Thank you.
I was at a parade with my son on Memorial Day for the Boy Scouts, and I'm like, oh, my God, that's Tom Suozzi's, congressman from Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And as an avid listener, I said, boy, what would Tom do? I busted up to him. I said, hey, Tom, I'm a 30-year Teamster, and, thanks for coming out to support Memorial Day. He's like, great, go in some people. And as he stepped aside, I gave him the old Columbo. Oh, and by the way, I hate big banks. And it stopped him in his tracks. And I said, I disagree with your vote last week. And he said, well, even if, I think he lied to me. I have to research it. Even if Christopher Dodd and Barney Frank supported it. And I said, I don't know that. And he said, yes, they supported my vote. And he kind of got muscled.
Well, Chris Dodd and Barney Frank are both now lobbyists for the banks.
Oh, I knew that.
So if they supported his vote, that's not a good thing, because they're lobbyists. Rob, thanks for the call. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairtom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Not only are we pleased to have Super Beets as an underwriter for our program, but it's a great product that I drink every day. Check it out at Tom's Beets, THOMSBEETS.com, or give them a call at 800-568-9889. Super Beets.